I want you to get together.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
It
like
was
that.
a couple months back. I did interview with you on your channel. That was a really great interview, really fun.
It was. I had a good time.
Yeah, my apologies on the time. I'm still getting used to living in Central Time. I've lived in the East Coast time all my life, so
It's okay. Honestly,
what I'm gonna do,
you're not the first, John. This is just the curse of living
no,
in England. It happens to me every time. I'm okay with it. I'm sorry
no,
I
it
couldn't get on
wasn't.
earlier.
It's not a problem. It actually wasn't your time zone issue. It's mine. I've lived in East Coast time my whole life, and now I'm in Central, and I struggle with the computer time clock. The systems are putting it in one. It's just confusing to me. Anyway, what I'm going to do is just restart, and so then I'll edit out. I've just been kind of hanging out with folks until you came on. So
Sure thing.
we're going to go ahead and get started. And good to be back with everybody. This is Wake Up or Else. We're a Christian fellowship for the truther community. So, what that means is we're followers of the Lord Jesus, but we also believe things like 9/11 was an inside job. And I always like to kind of roll this out for all the new folks, letting you know what we're about, because there is this difference in Christendom. There's Christians and then there's Christian truthers. So we love God, but we also found out NASA astronauts are actors. They're hanging on wires. The media is in on it. They're all treasonous Freemasons or clones or reptilians, who knows? All I know is they look at us like the way that we look at cows when you drive by a field. We're just useless eaters to these people that run everything. It's really hard to find this out when the rulers of the realm, the central planners, you find out are like maniacal eugenicists,
Yes.
constantly dreaming up different kinds of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I do.
Paul, you talk a lot about this too.
I do, yeah. I mean, my channel, Understanding Conspiracy, first and foremost, was about just understanding what is the conspiracy in every single kind of faction in the culture, spreading their viewpoint and I suppose what would you call it? Belief systems on the matter. So you get the New Age truthers, you get the more political truthers, shall we say, the left wing alt media truthers, or the 1% to 99. We are the 99% typers, the anonymous types, which have now kind of melded into a new group today, and groups have come and gone. Then you have the Christian conspiracy culture as well, which I've ended up landing in over the years. And I now believe the truth is in that, but I believe being a conspiracy theorist is not quite the same as just being a Christian, even though the truth is in Christ. I think being a Christian and a conspiracy theorist is something else. And to be honest, I don't think you can really truly be a proper Christian now without being a conspiracy theorist as well. That's might be a bit controversial to say, but in the times we live in, if you aren't clued into the stuff that's really going on behind the scenes, like the secret societies, the control mechanisms, the lies upon lies upon lies, as well as understanding the truth and faith in Jesus Christ and the truth of what we're going to talk about today, shall we say, I don't think you really understand what's going on. And I think you're being led astray. So conspiracy used to be a dirty word. I like to think we've claimed it back, and I think it's where everyone's kind of ending up now. And my channel is just there to help people cope with that. I know you wrote a book, The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, and I've been listening to the audiobook every now and then when I get a chance. And very much a man after my own heart. That's kind of what I do with my own podcast, The Truth, the Therapy Sessions, which you came onto.
Yes, and
it's kind of it's helping people deal with learning the truth, and from a solely Christian truther basis is where I do it. And yes, it's a horrible journey for a lot of people. You lose friends, you lose family, you lose face, you lose any semblance of identity you may have had in the old world. You truly do have to be born again once you learn these type of things. And it's a process, a long, painful process that I think a lot of people struggle to get through, or perhaps make mistakes along the way, which hopefully I can teach them about before they make those mistakes. But easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, you took it on the chin from your job, didn't you?
Well,
you had a conspiracy theorist loss of sorts, didn't you, with your job?
In a way, yeah. I used to be a manager of a supermarket, a deputy manager. So I worked below the main manager of the store, and I just got the job. I'd been working for the company for like 3 years by that point, and I moved store to this brand new store, and I'd been running a YouTube channel as well for those 3 years at the same time, growing it, and to become what it is. And I was in the thick of it, in like 2017, 18 onwards, from 14 to then, and a lot of stuff was going on. And I was an angry, overzealous truther type who was just riled up about everything, And I think maybe some of my early videos were a bit angry, a bit maybe not presented as well as they could have been, but it was a tumultuous time, if you remember that time period, and a lot of things were going on to make us angry,
Mm-hmm.
And my boss at the new store found the channel, and it was because someone who worked at my old store had done a shift at my new store and told everybody about Paul the crazy conspiracy theorist and his YouTube channel, which I kind of tried to keep under wraps at this new place, new beginning type of thing.
Yeah.
And anyway, the boss found it, and I came in one day, and they were like, "Oh, we found your channel, and we think, we're trying to protect you here. We're just trying to keep you safe." My area manager's there, by the way. She's turned up for this occasion as well. They're both there, sat in front of me, And said, "Look, we just need to protect you, Paul, because some of the things you talk about are really controversial, and
Yes.
if the staff get offended by some of the things you say, we're not going to be able to help you, as a multicultural, diverse company. We're not going to be able to defend you on this. So for your own safety, maybe it would be best if you need to get rid of this channel. And it's kind of, you can't be a manager and have this channel at the same time. Maybe we need to discuss demoting you back to store assistant, all this type of thing." And I was, at the time, I just got the job. I was in debt from uni, and I gave into fear, and I capitulated, and I shut the channel down. And for 5 years, I was off. I was off the internet, And I'm not my proudest moment, but I do think God used...
I had similar hiatuses where I tried to...
Go on, sorry.
No, I don't think there's anything to apologize for. I deleted my channel twice to try to save my marriage. So we tried to put family. You have a family. You got to provide for them. So there's no need to apologize. I just wanted you to share that because this is a very difficult path to walk. If you're a truther and a Christian, you're walking a lonely road. You have suffered losses. And somehow it's a very encouraging. It's stabilizing to find out that this experience is universally the same. It changes degree, but it's essentially the same for all of us. But I want to get back into our topic, what we're going to share today, which is so relevant. It is so groundbreaking. It's mind blowing. But I also wanted to mention, I think I'm probably correct by saying you're the leading authority in the world on the narrative that the Nephilim look like clowns, which is a really incredible revelation that Paul has really unpacked for believers in the church for the first time. And we have links to his book on that topic below, and all of Paul's channels, Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube, and also all of his channels on the different channels. But it does appear, Paul, from watching you as I have so profusely, that your attention to that has been swept away to some degree by this millennial reign thing. Is that an accurate assessment of your journey?
Yes and no. I'm still writing the second book on the matter. So I published the first book on the Nephilim look like clowns. You can see it just behind me here, the front cover. And that comes at the end of like 8 years worth of documented research from 2016. And I spent 8 years of my life formulating all the work on the Nephilim clown connection. And 8 years is a long time. I've done the podcast circuit, shall we say. I've been repeating myself over probably a good 100 podcasts now. And maybe I'm over exaggerating, but it feels like 100 podcasts. It's a lot,
Yes.
And you get to the point where you start repeating yourself quite a lot. And I've formulated the perfect 2-hour elevator pitch to explain everything, And I'm kind of writing the book to put the pin in it, because I've got a 45 episode series on my channel over the 8 years. And I don't think there's much more I can really say to hammer home the point. So I've wrote the first volume, which is about the history of the Nephilim, descriptions of what they look like, leading into the second book, which will go into all the cultures around the world who still dress like the Nephilim to channel them, basically. And it's a lot about spiritual warfare in there. It's a bit of a love letter to the psychedelic community to get them to stop thinking these entities they're talking to are something special. There's a lot to it, It's the history I come from. It's my own background. Trying to lead them to Christ, fundamentally. That's all the book's really for. But yeah, it's come to the point now where I'm going to finish the second book at the end of the year. I'm about 30% of the way through the second one. And that'll be basically my body of work on that done. And I do want to move on to new things, and I kind of, in October of last year to 2023, I think it was, October, I made the video, my first video on the topic we're going to talk about today, which is the millennial kingdom and the possibility that it's already happened and we're living in the little season of Satan. So that's it, summarized very quickly. I'm sure you may have mentioned it before to your own audience, but I made the video in October, that October, thinking to myself, like, ooh, do I want to do this? Do I really want to split focus right now? I'm the Nephilim clown guy. I'm riding high on this thing, on this idea, this concept. I'm the forerunner for it all. That's what I'm known for. But I just cannot leave this topic hanging like this. I might be a master of the Nephilim thing, but I'm a jack of all trades type of guy. And I also want to talk about other things. And this is just a big one. This is huge.
Yep.
It's all I could think. This is like, if this is the truth, then this changes everything. Everything we thought of is turned on its head now, And it's kind of like, I've got to just get out my thoughts on this. I have to explain everything going on in my mind about this idea. And this isn't my idea. This comes off my own research for like 3 years, watching the Tartarian stuff, the old world Antiquity Tech videos, leading into some early videos started to come out, maybe a couple of years after the Tartarian stuff, from, I think the channel was called Exploring Tartaria. She's not actually around now. She's gone silent. I think she may have regretted talking about it. I think she's gone back on her own belief on this matter, but she made an extremely compelling case that the millennial kingdom has already happened, and that what we see all around us in this architecture is the remnants of that kingdom, along with the saints everywhere, that would have ruled with Christ for those 1,000 years. And she talks about the timeline and where we would have been and how there seems to be a deception in the timeline and how this explains the Tartarian stuff. It's not Tartaria, it's the reign of Christ for 1,000 years, all this type of stuff. And, I spent like 3 years trying to process it because it was a few channels. It was very small info, Not everyone had really contemplated this concept yet. I spent like 3 years just thinking about this. I couldn't get rid of it. And I'm here talking about the clowns. While in the back of my mind, it's like, yeah, but what about the kingdom of Christ, though? You know what I mean? And it's kind of, okay, so I'll make this video in October. And I just literally spend 20 minutes in my car to half an hour just talking it out, all the points I've heard. And that video went viral. I think it's on something like 300, 400,000 views now. It's still going. And the comments I was getting back were like, whoa, hold up. What?
Yeah.
What did you just say? And they were like, wait a minute. Like, damn, that makes sense. You know what I mean? They were like stopped in their tracks, and just like I was. And I'm like, look, guys, I don't know if this is the truth. Yeah. All I know is we have to think about this. We can't just leave this to one side. I don't want to necessarily split my channel's focus to be about this topic, but I have to mention it. And then since that day, my channel has become one of the leading forerunner channels discussing the topic. And I've inadvertently fallen backwards into becoming some kind of leader of this idea. And I'm not the smartest. Yep. I'm not the best at this. I haven't done the most articulate research, but I do talk about it a lot. So we're here today to just discuss the idea, I think, for those who haven't really heard it for the first time.
Yep.
Yeah.
I binged on your stuff for a while. I think I listened to here, let me show everybody on the screen your channel. All right, so right here is the playlists. If you go there, there's 71 videos now. I listened to about 50 of them, so I'm pretty versed. I mean, a lot of great guests. Some of the guests that you had are just researching dudes. I mean, they have gone down this thing, and it's like the Bible changes. There's an endless amount of content that you can devote. And I realized after listening to about 10 or 15 videos is that I really can't devote myself to it and do this. But, having you come on here, I want to go on the record primarily on this topic, and have you walk us through sort of Satan's Little Season 101, where we highlight all of the evidences, both biblical and empirical evidences, just kind of rapid fire, where we have you just confirm our perceptions of this is reasonable conclusions we're making by looking at this. Because a lot of the folks I think there's a lot of people in my community that have embraced this, but some that I talk to still haven't. And like we go to the biblical examples where Jesus said, "Everybody here is going to see me, but will still be alive when I come back." And I say, "Well, what's your response to that scripture?" And they have to say, "I don't know." They don't have a response. So that's a valid biblical proof. And then all of the evidences that you have, that we rely on, I should say, like the, here, let me just go there. Empirical evidences like the architectural anomalies, the evidence of a fake history, the mud flood, the orphan trains and founding hospitals, the World's Fairs, the melted buildings. All of this adds up to being, in my opinion, it's more probable that this is happening than it isn't. That's where I stand at this point. So let me just go ahead and have you start with the foundation of this whole thing, which is Revelation 20, verse 7. And then if we do have time at the end, I do have a list of what I think are most of the main arguments against it. And so we can see if you can give us some responses to those as well.
Sure, I can do my best. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So Revelation 20, verse 7. This is actually a part of Revelation not many people have actually read. And have you put the S there as a Mandela effect wink or a nod there, or is that...
Yes, yes.
God, the amount of comments I got when I initially made the video saying, it's Revelation and not who do you think you are? I can't take you seriously now you've said that.
Exactly. That's what they told me. The guy said, I can't take you seriously. You don't even know what it's called. So I put it in parentheses.
I got the exact same thing, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure it's been Revelations for as long as I've been in the conspiracy community, you know what I mean? But okay, fair enough. It's not anymore, it's Revelation, whatever. That's fine, even though it's not one revelation, it's many revelations of Christ. But
it's funny you picked up on that, though. It's really fun.
I know,
you noticed that.
The parentheses threw me off. I was like, I bet he's talking about the Mandela effect. Yeah, okay. So we'll just read it. So it says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go and deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth, compassed the camp of saints about and the beloved city, and then fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So a lot of people haven't really read that far into their Bibles, funnily enough. This is one major point I realised when I first started talking about this. They had never really contemplated the gravity of what any of this actually meant, because their context is from a dispensationalist futurist standpoint that, well, this is way in the future, this isn't relevant to us today. So it's not really something that the churches or the preachers in the pulpits have dwelt on or mentioned, or if they do mention this 1,000 year, after the 1,000 years little season of Satan, they kind of say, well, that's just a very short period of time and it'll be over and done with very quickly because, Christ is ruling from the beloved city, having his millennial kingdom's eternal. Satan will just have a quick moment and then it's done and dusted and then it's forever and ever and ever happy rainbows and sunshine and lollipops. Let's just forget about it, And that's what most people have contemplated this verse to be. It's not been a thought because it's not relevant to us. It's a distant future problem because we haven't even had the millennial reign of Christ yet, according to the futurist dispensationalist doctrine.
Right.
So why would this even be on the radar necessarily? It wouldn't be. So I empathize with people who don't really know about this or what it means. So what we're saying is, no. If you read all of Revelation 20, prior to this, it explains how there'll be a time. Let's just get it up, shall we? Shall we get it up? Have you got a Revelation, the whole chapter 20 there?
Yep. Give me 1 second.
I think it's good to give the whole context, to be honest, just so they can get a full picture of this particular time. Because most people think we're in Revelations 11 through 16. We're still waiting for the tribulation. We're still waiting for the bowls of wrath to be poured out, you know what I mean? We're waiting for the Antichrist to appear again. We're waiting for all those things, We're waiting for the Derby rapture. You know what I mean? We're waiting for all that kind of stuff to happen still. So let's talk.
And before you jump in, isn't it important to highlight the fact that we are literalists? Because one of the common arguments is that this is all just a spiritual thing; it's not literal. So you are a literalist, right? We're not. preterists in the preterist sense, because in order to be a preterist, you have to not believe the Bible's true because you spiritualize it all. That's how they say it's already done, because it's not literal. But if it's literal and you're embracing this narrative, then you believe it all is literal, but we just believe now that it's already happened. And that's the big paradigm shift, right?
Yeah, preterists believe pretty much most prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. But they also consider the millennial reign of Christ to be a spiritual concept. It trickles down from heaven type of thing, and it's similar to something like a church age, shall we say, you know what I mean, which we have in the dispensationalist view. And you have to remember the preterism was created in the 17th century, 1600s, by a Jesuit as a counter-reformation to the Reformation from the Catholics, you know. And it was a way of trying to reinstate Catholic dominance. So they created this idea that, well, you know, the millennial reign has happened, and it's through us, the Church of the Catholic Church, you know. So that there was a lot of things going on at the time when preterism was formalized, so-called, as this doctrine. But we're not preterists. We haven't come to these conclusions because of some Jesuit who wrote something in the 1600s. We've come to these conclusions because it's what the Bible tells us has happened, and it's what Jesus Christ himself, through his own words, tells us has happened. So we are literalists in that sense, yeah. We take Jesus at his word. I don't think he lied to us. I think he was honest. I think he meant what he said to the people he was talking to at the time. And I think that the phrase audience relevancy will have to be mentioned quite a lot throughout this, because a lot of the objections that we get are from people who think Jesus was talking to us today. We're not. He wasn't. He was talking to the people of his time. And that's what people need to start realizing. A lot of the futurist doctrines are based on the idea that Jesus was talking through the disciples to us. That's not what he was doing. He was talking to specific people in a specific time. Paul was writing letters to specific churches at a specific time to those people, not us in the future. So that's something to lay that groundwork down. Well, let's just read this passage. So, I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that old serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up. So I think this is a literal 1,000 year. This is a time on earth where the devil is not around for 1,000 years. Could you imagine a time? What would that be like? What would it be like where humanity is completely unencumbered? No adversary whispering in their ears anymore, over the ears of kings and rulers. No more jealousy or pride being stoked by the adversary, shall we say, which is what Satan is a title for. He's not there anymore to stir the pot. He's not there anymore to tempt people or lead people off track or debase people or belittle people or judge people. Humanity's free of Satan for 1,000 years now. Let's bear that in mind. Let's carry on. And he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. So there's an end to this 1,000 years. This is where we define the millennial reign of Christ to have happened. This is the time period where there is a literal 1,000 years on earth where the devil is bound and Christ reigns supreme with an iron rod, as it's described. But after these things, he must be released for a little while. So there is an end to the millennial reign of Christ in this context. The millennial reign is where the 1,000 years of the devil is locked up. Now there's an end to this. There comes a point where the devil is released. Now that doesn't mean Christ suddenly doesn't have control anymore, or he's not king or supreme, or his kingdom is over. It just means the earthly physical portion of his eternal kingdom, the taster of the new heaven and earth, I like to describe it, has come to an end, a time where there's no devil. And this is where the devil's being released for a short while. So it says here, I saw thrones and they sat upon them, and the judgment was committed to them. And then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark in their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So the same that there, it's telling you now, while the devil's locked up for 1,000 years, Christ reigns for 1,000 years with his saints, who are the resurrected, martyred Christians of the time, those who were beheaded for his name's sake. A lot of people think this is a future thing. This is the issue. A lot of people think this means, well, we haven't had the mark of the beast yet, and we already see signs of the times today that this is all coming to fruition. The temple is being built. Israel has been made a nation again. It's it all must be happening in our time. And this book is written in a time where, the temple hasn't been, the temple, according to where we're told this book was written in around the 90s, first century, we're supposed to believe that the temple had already been destroyed by this point in 70 AD. Yet there's no mention from John here that this has happened. But let's change the timings a little bit here, and you think we've been lied to about history, it's more likely that this book was written in about 66 AD, early 60 AD. And the reason there's no mention of the destruction of the temple is because it hasn't happened yet. This is telling you of a time that's about to happen. And I'll get my document up in a minute, and I'll show some of the quotes which talk about the immediacy of this problem. The immediacy of these words of Christ. He's telling John, this is about to happen now. These things are coming to pass now. Do not seal up the words of this. Tell everybody, tell the churches, the 7 churches, this is about to happen very, very shortly. And he's telling you what's about to happen. The millennial kingdom's about to begin. I'm coming in my kingdom in the clouds. All glory, I'm coming right now. Get everybody ready. And there's going to be tribulation. There's going to be absolute destruction coming upon everybody very soon. And it says, blessed are those who take part in the first resurrection, because they get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. The second death has no power. They're already in the new heaven and earth bodies, shall we say. They've made through the trials. They've passed the test already. They've shown themselves committed to God and Christ. They get to reign with Christ as kind of like bishops and rulers and leaders and kings in their own right over whoever survives tribulation, basically. For the 1,000 years after tribulation, they get to reign with him. I mean, that's what the blessed hope is today, right? That's what people think is coming upon them and what they get to have soon after a rapture of some sorts, where they get to avoid all the punishment and the martyrdom. When it says here, the saints are going to be martyred for his name's sake, right. And then they will be resurrected and they get to rule with Christ for 1,000 years. So that means there'll be people around who are going to be ruled, who aren't resurrected saints, perhaps survivors of tribulation. And there's questions which we'll get into, a bit conspiratorial, of who else are we talking about here as well? What is actually going to be happening here? And it says here, they shall be priests of God and Christ and shall reign with him for 1,000 years. And it says, once the 1,000 years is expired, he'll be released from his prison and go out and deceive the nations, which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them to battle, whose number is of the sands of the sea. Now, this is a very important point here. When Satan is released after 1,000 years, he deceives the nations. Billions of people. Numbers of the sands of the sea. And you have to ask yourself this question, and what a lot of Christians have assumed is kind of, when Satan's released, everyone's going to know Christ because he's there. So he's not going to do very well, and his rebellion will be very quickly squashed. That's not what it says happens. It says he gathers an enormous army from all the nations of the earth. They get deceived. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, if people knew it was Christ, how can you convince anybody to make war with him? How are you going to convince the earth to make war with Jesus, the Son of God, after a 1,000-year reign where it boggles the mind. And again, maybe we'll get into those conclusions later, but bear that in mind. And this is why I think we can look to today and see this is the time we're in now. We're in this little season where Satan's been released. And we'll go into the evidences to explain how we have figured this out. And it's not simply just based off of preterism or these doctrines that have been around for a while. You can see it with your own eyes when you actually pay attention to the world around us. There's plenty of physical evidences and also the words of our Saviour himself, of Christ himself. But that's the story. That's where we are. I've laid a few little things here and there to get you kind of ready for what's to come and what we're going to discuss. But this is where we actually are in the timeline, I've come to believe now. We are not waiting for the mark of the beast anymore. We're not waiting for tribulation to come upon us anymore. The Antichrist to stand in the temple, all of that stuff. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. It all happened in that time. It happened not long after Jesus ascended in Pentecost. It all came upon that generation in their time, just as all the apostles believed it would, just as Jesus Christ said it would. He is not a liar. He told the truth, and we are at the back end of a period of time in history where humanity was super advanced, well clued into the ether with extreme technology beyond all comprehension that we can't even build today. It's all there laid out clear as day. Christ has reigned on earth. His kingdom has come. and his saints were resurrected, and whoever we are, well, let's just speculate on that, shall we? That's all we can really do. But there are plenty of evidences to show that if we are not the remnants of those who lived through the reign, and their parents and their children and their children's children, we could be the resurrected rest of the dead, as it explains in Revelation there at the end.
Right. Let me just throw a couple of disclaimers out here. First of all, Paul's channel has 71 different videos on this topic. I've listened to about 50, and I came to the conclusion that this is a very vast, complicated topic. So if you come to this with a denominational bias and throw this off, just like people are doing with the Bible changes, they just bark out these decrees. Well, the Bible can't change, and they never bother to read my 400-page systematic theology refuting that, then you have no recourse with people like that. So if you're listening to Paul, you have to tap the brakes, and you have to not use these a priori arguments like, well, this can't be true because... Well, I've listened to his guests who are scholars, and Paul himself talk about like the bizarre fact that the camp of the saints may be a floating pyramid in the North Pole that's going to come over onto Siberia, and that's then going to be used to try to get all the people of the earth to fight against Jesus. I mean, these are really wiggy topics that we're wading into.
Oh, yeah.
The first resurrection, by some people's estimates, is all of the people that lived before Christ were resurrected and given a chance to accept Christ. I mean, these are really hard to get your head around narratives that you're not going to be able to factor into your decision process until you've listened to 50 of these videos. So I wanted to just mention that, try to have people warn them against these superficial knee-jerk reactions to this topic, because it is not simple to get your head around this.
It's understandable, though. I get why people react that way. I really do.
I do, too.
This is not something I easily came to accept. It really isn't, because I was there for a long time, seeing the signs of the time unfold before us. The mark of the beast is here. The Antichrist is clearly here. Wars and rumors of wars are upon us. Earthquakes in diverse places. Wars happening over here. It's kind of it's like clearly, it's clearly happening now. The New World Order is upon us. The Antichrist will reign soon and stand in the temple that's being built in the Middle East. And it's kind of, we all believe. It seems quite obvious. Of course we're in the time of revelation and tribulation. Of course we're in that time. Did you not see the moon at the feet of the woman in the sky? And it's kind of all these signs everywhere, that seem obvious to us. But I would say, well, it's a wicked generation who seeks after a sign. Remember that. That's what our Savior has told us. And we need to be careful about that kind of thing, okay? You can fabricate signs when you have enough power and influence and money and control everything and can control the weather. Okay, you can make it seem quite convincing that tribulation is upon us. There's always going to be a new mark of the beast, There's always going to be a new Antichrist figure. And you know what? They present them like that on purpose, So.
Isn't it true that the Rothschilds were directly responsible for establishing Israel, and that the red heifers are a result of DNA cloning?
Yeah, along with the help of the Balfour Declaration in Britain as well. Yeah, the whole establishment of that area has truly nothing to do with tribulation or the true biblical timeline or God's true Israel people. The people who are in that land are the ones who rejected Christ. They're the ones who judgment came upon in the first century when the temple was destroyed in the 40-day war of Rome, who completely decimated and burnt down the Jerusalem, and the temple. And we've come to understand that is the harlot. Jerusalem at that time, and the people who rejected Christ, they are the harlot who rides the beast, which is Rome. And the beast obviously destroys the harlot, which is exactly what happened in 70 AD. The prophecy was fulfilled. It's all done. It's pretty much over. We're just in the final chapters of Revelation now. We're in the little season,
The cognitive dissonance against this is going to be so strong to think, it looks so clear that we're going into the tribulation. One generation after Israel becomes a state is when Christ returns. Well, that was, 1947, I think? Well, then they keep pushing the goalposts back because supposedly that was 40 years, and now it's 2024. But think of the lengths that they've gone to with NASA and the media and all of the things that they've done to weave this web that you're on a spinning ball. And you said it in the beginning, the people have this whole inertia behind them. Here's one of the biblical evidences is Matthew 16:28. Says, I say to you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, if you go to the commentaries, you get this kind of blow-off analysis is what I call it. This is Eliot's commentary. He says, the immediate sequence of the vision of the Son of Man transfigured from the lowest state in which he had then lived and moved into the excellent glory which he met the gaze of the three disciples has led not a few interpreters to see in that vision the fulfillment of this prediction. Okay, so what he's saying is there's a lot of people that are taking this as it seems to be saying, right? But then he goes on to say a closer scrutiny, in other words, must, however, lead us to set aside that interpretation. So that's what we're up against, Paul, is all of the different commentaries I have here are basically either spiritualizing this scripture and saying, let me assure you that there are some here present that shall not die. And he goes on to say that it's just the kingdom of heaven is what he's talking about, not him personally. Or they'll say it's the state of Israel. It isn't really the people that were there.
Oh,
right?
Another one I've heard for that one is it's the transfiguration. It comes afterwards where he talks to Elijah on the hill, and some of the disciples are there witnessing this, and they don't know what to do. They're like, do I need to get you something? And he's like, I'm talking, relax. It's kind of, but they see him in all his glory then, and with talking to the dead, and the people that came before, and the Lord said, well, that's what he was talking about. That's him coming in his kingdom and his power. He says, no, it's not. That's him just manifesting into the spiritual realm, and they're witnessing his glory in his true form. But that's not him coming with his kingdom in all his glory. That's not the establishment of his reign, which is what the kingdom truly is, which was not established by the time he still had to, the sacrifice still had to be made. He still had to descend into Hades. All this stuff had to be done first before he could defeat death and bring his kingdom, and put things right. So again, a lot of people twist themselves into pretzels to try and explain away a lot of the verses that we're going to discuss today.
Right. So why should we take this as it seems to be the clear testimony of Scripture? Mm-hmm. Why should we take it any other way? Why do you believe that this means, like if I say, hey, I'm going to go to the store, I'll be right back, and then I come back 2,000 years later, doesn't that make me a liar? Or is there any validity to reinterpreting this in a spiritual way?
I don't think so. I mean, it was in 1830 when John Nelson Darby created this dispensationalist 2,000-year church age doctrine and the rapture doctrine as well. He was the kind of proponent of this idea that there'd be a taking away before tribulation, because he in his time was kind of in that idea of, well, Christ clearly hasn't come back yet, so it must be a future thing. So he kind of established this futurist doctrine in that time in the 1830s. And I've tried to look into it, and there's not really affiliation with him being a Freemason or anything like that. He did start his own kind of small church group, which still goes on today, which is like a brotherhood of sorts, the Brethren, I think he calls himself. But it's from that doctrine we get what we get today. And obviously it seems like that's predominantly what became the established church doctrine of most churches as well. Because from our context, being people who have been deceived in the little season, who don't know when we are or who we are, that makes the most sense. Well, Christ clearly hasn't come back yet, so it must be a future thing. Therefore, we must be living in some kind of church age. Even though, biblically speaking, that phrase isn't anywhere in the Bible, church age. That's us applying a framework over the words of Christ because we can't square with the reality we currently live in. Where is he? Where's the promise of his coming? Do you know what I mean? So we have to have this. Well, it must have been a spiritual thing. And he reigns for eternity, which is what the millennia just means. 1,000 years to the Lord is a day, and a day is 1,000 years. So it's an eternity. It goes on forever and ever and ever. Even though that passage was about God's patience, it was a metaphor for his patience, not a literal statement about time. So a lot of people don't want to take those contexts. They want to pull verses from anywhere and try and mash them together into this idea that fits with what they can perceive currently from what they're being told by their leaders in churches. And there's definitely an element of deception going on, because there seems to be an element of control from the higher up making the seminaries teach this false doctrine. But prior to 1830, dispensationalist futurist doctrine wasn't the norm. Historicism was, which viewed the Bible as a history book.
Mm-hmm.
Only from the 1830s and then the 1860s when it was formalized, and then a revival in the 1960s, 70s with the Jesus People movement did this kind of futurist idea solidify again not long after Israel was established as a nation. Do you get what I mean? So it seems like
Yes.
there was a latching on to this momentum of this belief system after the 40s into the 70s to make it the prominent belief system now, today, because it's beneficial to those in power to make us believe Jesus Christ is about to return and we're waiting for his millennial kingdom. That's where the deception kind of really began, you know. But
and you really,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you really have to be a truther to be able to even consider this, because for my journey, I think is similar to a lot of people. Like this passage here, Matthew 16:28, and Revelation 1:7, certainly gives me biblical permission to suggest that this is scriptural, because the clear testimony of Scripture here is that he's saying, hey, I'll be back soon. And then you have all the immediacy scriptures as well, which I have here, that really, a lot of atheists pointed to the disciples as evidence that the Bible isn't true, because they're like, the disciples apparently believed that Jesus was coming back because of all these immediacy scriptures. Okay, so that was a huge thing for me. Then, however, because I'm a nutcase, conspiracy theorist kook nut job, living in my mom's basement eating pita pockets, I was able to embrace the fact that our history is fake. And that the mud floods, I mean, you wouldn't even hear about mud floods if you're a normie. So, or the orphan trains or any of these empirical evidences, which just really pushed me over the edge. So,
well, on that point, this is the thing, like the only reason I so easily accepted this concept is because, like you said, I already had years of research into all these other concepts. Why, what's the alien agenda all about? Why even have secret societies? What are the Freemasons really doing with all these buildings? And it's kind of, what is this Tartarian thing going on? What the hell was this mud flood about? What was this ancient civilization? You know, it's like you already have all of this knowledge that all these things have happened, and once you get this concept in your mind, everything falls into place. It's like the grand unifying glue that brings all the puzzle pieces together into a solid image. It's like with this. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me ask you that question right there. Because with my journey with the Bible changes, it took God 8 years to show me two objective ways to absolutely prove this is happening. The first is that everybody's misremembering the same way, and that becomes mathematically impossible. The second is the universal Bible changes. Because the biggest argument is either you're misremembering or you're confused by Bible versions. But if all the changes are in all Bibles, I can't be confused by Bible versions. So in your journey, the biggest argument here that I see is there's no proof that the millennial reign already happened. So in your journey, what would be your top 2 or 3 evidences that the millennial reign has happened?
Okay, well, first of all, let's just get it right. The words of Jesus himself should be should be our main foundation to go off first. Okay, we don't look here. You know, let's let Jesus tell the truth. Let's go out there and you can find the evidences from there. You know, you really can. So Matthew 16:28. Verily I say unto you, there'll be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, I don't think many people he was talking to in that time are still alive today. Okay, so he must have come back in their lifetime, and that's repeated in Mark. There'll be some of them that stand here which shall not taste death till they have the kingdom of God come with power. That's Mark 9:1, Luke 9:27. But I tell of you the truth, there'll be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the kingdom of God. Then you've got Matthew 10:23. But when they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over all the cities of Israel until the Son of Man become. Last I checked, if we want to go off the land of Israel we have today as a region, not very big. Wouldn't take that long to get through all the cities before he came back, you know. And then we've got Romans 13:11 through 13. Paul is saying, knowing the time that is now, it is high time to wake up out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The apostles knew he was coming in their time. It was the urgency of their message. Paul was telling people not to have children. Don't have kids in this time. It'd be terrible for you about what's to come on the earth, because he truly believed. It's coming now. And so what, were the apostles just wrong as well? We call ourselves believers in the word? We believe these people who followed Christ, who believe in Christ, yes. Yet when it comes to that, but not that bit. No, I don't believe that bit. You can't do that. That's not how this works. We have 1 Peter 4:7. But in the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer, which I think you have there as well. And then it's, verily I say unto you, Matthew 24:34, this generation shall not pass till these things be fulfilled. And this is where people start twisting themselves up in pretzels. They take that one verse and they say, he was talking about the fig tree generation, a future generation to come. Oh, well, I'm sure the people who listened to the Olivet Discourse and were sat there in front of him were relieved to hear that, oh, well, at least he's not talking about me. Right? Do you think that's what those people were thinking at the time? Jesus must be talking about that future generation with iPads on the phone, you know what I mean, who have to takeaways and drive-thrus and go to the movies. You know what I mean? He must be talking about those people, not me right now listening to him say this. And this is where people, you have to understand audience relevancy. The Bible was written
What does that mean, Paul? What does audience relevancy mean to you?
You have to read the book in context to who he was talking to in his time. Who was the audience for his words? We believe it's us. But the Bible was written, yes, for us. We can read it today and glean information from it, but it wasn't written to us. It was for the people of the time. We have to remember that. Okay, so this is the problem. This is where a lot of people get mixed up. They think the book is talking to them now, and Jesus was talking through those people to us. And that's just lunacy. That's insane. No one in the time of Jesus and no one who listened to these words believed he was talking about a future generation. They knew, and they make it clear, even the apostles make it clear, he meant us in our time. We are the generation that will not pass before he comes back. The time is at hand.
Go ahead. Can I make the distinction that there are promises that are universally for the body of Christ? What we're talking about specifically are these prophecies that were not to us, but were for us. Is that correct? If it says, these signs will follow them that believe, they'll lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. That is for me, right?
Well, when it comes to salvation and your eternal salvation, yes, there's things that can be applied all throughout the ages because the work is done. Absolutely.
Yep.
But if we're talking here specifically about when's Jesus coming back, it's very specific. It's specific to the people of the time.
All right, so evidence number one is Scripture. I love that answer. Let's go to evidence number two. What is your number two best evidence that the millennial reign has already happened? Because that's the number one argument I get. There's no proof that the millennial reign happened. My understanding is they rebuild it as the Dark Ages, which was a time when there was very little records kept, and it was just plagues and wars and nothing to see here. Move along, right? So what's the evidence that it really was the millennial reign?
Well, it's not very little evidence. There's no evidence of that time ever existing. There's nothing. There's no artifacts. There's no writing. Doesn't exist. There's nothing from that time. So they call it the Dark Ages because we can't find any evidences for that particular part of the first century. Sorry, the first millennium. We don't have anything from that time. So it went dark, shall we say. Now, the second best evidence I have is that if you look into the archaeological evidence, and I did a presentation very recently with JT Follows JC, it's on my channel, and we found the work of a historian called Gunnar Heinzen, a German man. He died very recently.
Yes.
He laid out very clear, and his work is off the back of many other people, other historians who have similar history revisionist evidences, but he was clearly showing you can take 700 years out of the first millennium. They don't exist. They're not there. So, classically speaking, we believe in antiquity, middle antiquity, and late antiquity. Okay, and that's the 1st century, the 5th century, and the 9th century. And in those times, there was massive, cataclysmic disasters in our historical record. So there was a disaster of the invasion of the barbarians in the 1st century. There was complete and total destruction through volcanic ice ages in the 5th century, 6th century, 5th century. And then something similar happened, like a mud flood of sorts in the 9th century. People think maybe a comet, something like that. We don't really know, but what we can tell is at least 90% of the population of the Earth was wiped out in that time period. There's nothing,
Wow,
that's what we know. But we have separated this cataclysmic event into 3 separate events spread out over 700 years. 1st century, 6th century, 9th century. Get rid of the time between those things. That's one cataclysm that happened in the 1st century. Now, that means the 1st century, let's remove 700 years from that, is the 8th century. That time in between, there is no time in between. So if you do the math, that actually puts us not in the year 2024 right now. We're in like the year 1324. That's where we are currently. Okay, so the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Tribulation came not long after that. Let's say maybe 10 years after that, something like that. Around 70 AD, tribulation suddenly came upon the earth, destroyed 90% of the people, and then suddenly, in the 8th century, which is the 2nd century, let's go back in time here, monasteries appear everywhere. All historians,
Right.
It's just nothing but churches everywhere. Christendom takes full control in the 8th century, miraculously. We have no idea why, it just did. And suddenly, everyone's using the timeline, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, after Christ.
Yes.
And that's the only thing people knew, after Christ. We are after Christ, that's all they knew. And they rebuilt civilization from there. And I think that was the beginning in the 8th century of, well, this is technically the 1st century of the millennial reign of Christ after that cataclysm. And then it's been 1,000 years since then. And then around what we call the 1700s, 1600s, the Enlightenment period, the coming out of the Dark Ages into the new age of reason and science and evolution and philosophy and heliocentrism and all these type of things, you know what I mean, started to appear around this time. And Christendom began to fade into the background. I think that's when the release of Satan began. That's when the millennial kingdom faded and the little season took over. And we are now pretty much at the back end of that. And if the millennial kingdom was from 70 AD to 1070 AD, and then there's a little season after that, we are at the end of that little season now, which is about 200 years, 250 years. And just take 700 years out of the first millennium. All the evidence is there to prove it doesn't exist. Even the layered strata, which archaeologists use to determine civilization and dates, it all proves there's nothing below Rome. And nothing,
This is so mind-blowing.
yeah, there's nothing there. There is no layer. There is no layers. There's just Rome. It was all buried, and then then monasteries were built on top. That's it.
All right,
You know.
this is your talk here. This is our timeline is wrong. You conspiracy and J. This is it right here, right on your channel.
That's it. Yeah. So you can actually watch just the Gunnar Heinsohn production itself. I did upload that as well. But that's me and JT live going through the entire presentation,
Cool.
presenting all our backing up information from our point of view with it too. So there's
right, so
there's plenty of evidence even from the archaeological and historical community, people with PhDs, you know, with the receipts proving our timeline is wrong. We have been lied to about time.
Bam. And there's tons of other evidence, like the buildings that have the 857 on it in one picture, and then there's another picture where it gets doctored and they put a 1 in front of it or an I.
Put 1,000 in front of it, yeah, or an I or a J or something like that. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. There's plenty of. It seems like there was a cover-up attempt in that. Well, I want to say 1700s, but really it's 1070. That's the real. Let's remove 700 years. That doesn't exist, you know. So we're actually in the year 1070. Satan's released from the 1,000-year imprisonment. We call that the 1700s, but it's not. Maybe we've been lied to about that first of all, and then that's when Freemasonry gets involved. That's when secret societies come out of hiding, because they had to hide during that 1,000-year reign of Christ, because it was dirty to be a Satan worshipper, you know what I mean? During the reign of Christ, you can't be doing that.
Yep.
The secret societies reformulate, and new Rome is re-established, because the old Roman Empire is what ended when the millennial reign was established. So Rome becomes re-established, and we live in the New World Order today. We live in New Rome today. The new Roman Empire is the beast that lives again. The beast system, the fourth beast kingdom of Daniel's prophecy, is re-established, and we live in that today in the little season. And Satan's minions, the secret societies, all came out of the woodworks, and there was a huge concerted effort during that time to rewrite history, bury the evidence, destroy the books, burn the books, take over the buildings, claim ownership, rewrite the dates, deface buildings, take things off them, paint over murals,
Right.
all of it. Hugely
Let me ask
hidden,
you about that.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you about that. All right. So one of the arguments I've heard is like, when do you believe the millennial reign ended? I know you don't know, but what's your best guess?
Yeah, around about 1666, 1700s. I'd said that number
All
just
right.
for posterity, but it's around the Enlightenment period, we call it. The Renaissance Enlightenment.
So the
period.
argument is, if the millennial reign is ending, is that recent? There would be people writing about it in the history books. This is not possible. Well, hold on now, because I've listened to your talks on this with guests and drilling down, and the insane asylums was a big part of how they segued into this new historical timeline, and they basically wiped out all the dissenters because they just stuck them in the insane asylums, right?
Pretty much, yeah. You'll find these insane asylums are like glorious castles and mansions. It's kind of like, and they were supposedly built by the Oddfellows and the Freemasons, these
Right.
glorious, beautiful buildings to house insane people. How many lunatics do you supposedly have during the expansionist movement out west of America when it was a brand new nation? It doesn't make any sense. And who has time to build all these buildings when you're a brand new country, supposedly, that should be spreading west very slowly, cowboy times, you know what I mean? None of it makes any sense, like when you actually look at the narrative.
How many insane asylums were there in the 1800s? Like
hundreds. And there's like 2 or 3 today. It's over. So we don't have insane people anymore. Okay, fair enough. But when you actually look into these things, it seems like not only was there a large population of insane people being suddenly crammed into these prisons, but then there was a huge boom in orphans as well. So the children of these people who were locked up were relocated, renamed, the names removed, the re-educated, and re-established. And if you look at look at the Oddfellows logo, which was a prominent Freemasonic offshoot of that time, the motto is playing off a Christian concept. Look after the widows, teach the orphans, feed the sick, and all, bury the dead, and all this type of thing. But when you actually break it down, it's bury the dead. Look after the widows because you've killed their husbands, and re-indoctrinate the children into a new history. And lo and behold, the logo is a globe at the top, 2 women next to a globe. So it's kind of they completely rewrote history, And people say, "Oh no, we would have books." It's like, no, you wouldn't. They've had plenty of time to hide it all and rewrite history. We have been completely lied to. It's not what you think. The history we have, so-called, was written by the winners, and when Satan was released, we lost. And it's his time, and all the nations get deceived. How?
I'm afraid to ask you this question, Paul. I'm afraid to ask, but I got to ask this question. Where did all the infants come from? Is there any truth to the Cabbage Patch thing where they're created out of, like, who knows what, out of the ground? Is there? I forget what it's called, but it's
maybe. I think these were weird times. Okay, I think even not that long ago, we had dog-headed people around and blemmies with chest-headed people, and there was creatures knocking about, dragons and this type of stuff, still around, weird, odd things. I think the millennial reign of Christ was a strange place. Medieval, and the medieval documentations of everything, people were riding around killing dragons still, giant snakes, and it's kind of, things were different in that time. And I think understandings of science, so-called, I suppose they wouldn't have called it science, alchemy or whatever it was, magic or something today. I think they had an understanding about the nature of reality that far surpasses our understanding today. We are very limited, and maybe children can be grown out of the ground in ways we don't understand, But I think one thing we could imagine is that would be a good cover-up for what a possibility is, explain in Revelation, is the rest of the dead are not resurrected until the 1,000 years has ended. That's what it says in Revelation 20, verse 7, or verse 8, or maybe I can't remember, I think it might be verse 9. But it says, once the 1,000 years has ended, and we know what the 1,000 years is, it's when the Satan's locked up. It's when Christ rules with his saints. Once it ends, full stop, it ends. Because a lot of people believe it's eternal. A lot of people today believe, millennial kingdom comes, then it's an eternity of a new heaven and earth forever. That's what a lot of people believe happens. That's what a lot of people are waiting for now. They're waiting for Christ to come after tribulation to establish his kingdom, and then forever and ever and ever and ever he goes on for eternity. But it clearly says it ends, and then Satan takes over. And it's possible the rest of the dead are resurrected, when the 1,000 years has ended, like it tells you in Revelation. Those are the words that are used. You can't really cut it any other way. It says when it has ended, the rest of the dead are resurrected. And people have always assumed, who don't want to accept this, is that's the end of the little season. Everybody's resurrected for final judgment. That's what it must mean. But it doesn't necessarily say that. It says the rest of the dead who take part in the second resurrection, the first were the saints who got to rule for 1,000 years on earth, are resurrected when the 1,000 years has ended. So it's possible people were just bursting out of the ground. It's possible the dead were rising at the advent of the little season. It's possible the earth had a population boom of babies that were perhaps sacrificed in the past life, just suddenly popping out of the ground out of nowhere and just growing out of cabbage patches, maybe. I don't know. But something weird.
Homunculus.
Yeah,
right?
Something
Homunculus
weird happened. Yeah. And it's kind of like they were giving these babies away. You know, these infants were everywhere. It's kind of, we don't know what to do with all these children. They're just everywhere. They keep coming. So you have this orphan thing going on as well. And there's a massive relocation effort. And it's possible. I can't say cut and dry, this is absolutely what happened here. But I'm a conspiracy theorist. I believe in some crazy things. I'm open to the idea that we could be the descendants of the rest of the dead, or we ourselves could be people who lived before Christ manifest again in a new body. I don't know. Like maybe when every time a child is born today, an old soul is plucked out of Sheol and put back into the world, and that's the final run. Now you have a chance of salvation. Now you can live in a time where you know Jesus and can make a choice. Because prior to this, everyone was under the law, and everyone failed. They were never going to be good enough. Now they can accept the gift of grace and salvation through Jesus Christ. They'll be forgiven under Christ's sacrifice and seen as blameless when it comes to the final judgment. But it's not fair to those people who never got a chance to live during that time. So maybe it's fair now that they can be resurrected again in the little season. Maybe this is the point of the little season, so people can have a fair shot. You can know evil, you can know good. You can know the devil and live in his world, or you can keep your eye on the kingdom of God and accept Jesus. Everyone can make that choice now. So maybe that's what it was really all about. Maybe that's why we have a little season at all. I don't know. I'm in the realms of speculation here. Don't quote me on this. I know people don't like me saying this because it's like, well, now you're talking about reincarnation, No, I'm talking about resurrection. Our book is a book about defeating death and resurrection. This is completely in the realms of God's possibility. If he wants to resurrect the dead and give them a chance of salvation, our God can do that. I will not limit him. And this isn't like
and there's
an endless cycle of reincarnating back into the world until you get enough karma. None of that nonsense. It's one more chance. I'm going to give the rest of the dead one more chance. Jesus descended down when he died and his sacrifice straight to Hades, straight to Sheol. He resurrected Abraham's bosom, says, you're coming with me, you're ruling with me for 1,000 years, we're coming to heaven and we're coming back down. And then he said to the rest of the dead, I'm coming back for you. Like maybe he gave a judgment then. Maybe that was their first judgment. It's kind of, you all failed the first time, you're going to get one more chance. Just wait here. I'll be back in like 40 years. Something like that. I don't know. But again, it's fun to think about. And it's completely in the realms of possible here. I don't think this is something you can just brush off easily because I don't know, it knocks your sensibilities of what you learned from church.
Right.
I don't.
So
Go ahead.
One of my listeners asked me to ask you about these two passages. Revelation 20, verse 6, 'cause we're talking about the resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection.
Yeah.
On such the second death hath no power. And then also 2 Timothy 2:18, who concerning the truth have erred, saying that the resurrection is past already. Mm-hmm. So that's a scripture that's been used to bash you over the head, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not sure what they want me to do about Revelations 26. I mean, it makes it clear the people who take part in the first resurrection, who get to reign as priests with an iron rod with Christ for 1,000 years, are those who were martyred for his namesake in the first century, and also all the saints throughout history, all his prophets and all those who...
So this would be what we call the rapture? This is what we're referring to as the rapture, Revelation 20, verse 6?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's they're just resurrected from the dead. These are people who died. The people who took part in the first resurrection died. They were beheaded. They are.
Oh, okay.
They are the martyrs of Christ. They did not give in when the mark of the beast was around, when temptation was high, when the beast system had the foot on their neck. They died till the end. They became the Roman candles. They were fed to the lions. They were tortured.
Gotcha.
They saw tribulation and like no one else has ever foreseen, any Christians ever suffered in history. They went through the worst form of persecution. Those are those who get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years in the initial first resurrection. But the rest of the dead, those who fell short, they live not again till the 1,000 years has ended. That's what we know. So we can speculate from there what that means. In terms of the 2 Timothy 2:18, concerning the truth have erred, saying that the resurrection has already passed and overthrown the faith of some. Well, if you get the whole context of that, Paul is writing a letter to Timothy in Macedonia, I believe. I think that's where it is, in Asia Minor at the time. And is it Philetus? I can't remember the other name now. I'm on the spot here, it's eluding me. But there's these two guys going around saying, oh, no, it's already happened. The resurrection's already happened. The rest of the dead have already been resurrected, And Paul is saying some people have lost their faith because of these two men. Let's get some context. These two men, in that time, when Paul was writing that letter to Timothy, yes, they were wrong to say the resurrection has already passed because the temple hadn't even been destroyed. And yes, the resurrection had not happened yet because he was talking to people of that time in Macedonia, not you now sat at your computer thinking you've got one up on me. It's kind of, this is not about us. This is about two men in that time in Macedonia.
Okay.
It's not about us. And yeah, they were wrong to say that then. Because the resurrection hadn't happened then. But it did happen maybe about 20 years later. Something like that in their time. So there you go. That's it. And that's the problem. People read that passage and think that he's talking about me. That's for me now. It's like, yeah, but Paul once said to two people 2,000 years ago, they were wrong for saying such a thing, therefore you're wrong for saying it now. It's like, no, think about audience relevancy. Who was Paul writing the letter to and when? It's not you now. It was those people then, and they were wrong then. I'm not wrong to say it now. Do you know what I mean? That's the difference.
Okay.
That's how we have to take those verses in context to who they were written to. But we have this disease in the church today where everything is taken for us now, and it only comes from this Darbyist, futurist, dispensationalist worldview which was developed in 1830. It's brand new to history, to us, and it wasn't long after the little season began that this type of belief system was established. It's wrong, because this is the thing, the devil cannot get rid of Christ. The devil cannot hide the Bible or the truth. He can't hide all the evidences that Christendom ruled, the churches, the Gothic cathedrals, the murals, the evidences that for 1,000 years the Byzantine Empire ruled. You know what I mean? Like, you can't hide Christ, but what can the devil do? He can make you misinterpret when you're living. He can change the time you live in. And that's how he does it. That's how he deceives you. He can't hide that Christ exists, but he can make you believe in the wrong time zone. And that's what he's done with us. It's a slight shift. So you get a lot of people today who are Christians, and I'm not saying their salvation's at fault here, but they have certainly been deceived by the devil. I'll say that much. But as long as John 3:16 stands, as long as you believe with all your heart, that God has sent his son and he died and rose from the dead, you're saved. Okay, this is not a salvation issue. But if you want the truth, you haven't got it by simply following church doctrine. You've not got it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right, and Red Storm posts, I've been told that we are trying to steal their blessed hope by saying the millennial reign already happened. Well, your faith, I agree that that's an argument, but your faith is in the wrong thing. It's kind of like you don't get to eat the cake after dinner, but you still get the steak. There's no loss here that's worth saying, well, because of that, it isn't true. That's not good evidence that this isn't happening.
Well, my
right?
faith was never based on the idea that I get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years on earth and rule over people. I mean, when I came to Christ, I believed in him because he saved me from certain death. He saved me from a life of wretched misery and pain, and he made me a new creation, and I'm thankful for that, and he is my Lord and Savior. That's why I believe in Jesus, and I don't ask for anything else from him. He's done enough for me. I don't care about reigning as a god for 1,000 years over other men who weren't as good as me. I don't care about any of that. And it was never on my radar to think about my faith being based on anything like that. I didn't have a blessed hope. I mean, the only thing, I suppose, if I want to put my hope and faith in anything, it's when the new heaven and earth is established after the little season has ended. People,
Yeah, I don't feel ripped off because
No.
I'm not going to get to reign. That's like an afterthought to me. Anyway, let me point out one of the biggest evidences for me was the Archeological. The buildings are impossible. The time frames that they were built, they're all over the world. They were built supposedly in the 1800s by guys that lived in shanties with no power tools. I've seen in-depth analysis of the logistics, which are virtually impossible, that they were built in 2 years. One guy did this analysis where the quarry was 400 miles away, and it was like 1 million pounds of marble, and they did it in 2 years. It's impossible. We're being lied to. And then there's this weird narrative that goes through almost all of these buildings where the history books tell us the building burned. Then there was a architect auction, right? And then they were rebuilt. Isn't that right? There's this narrative that's behind a lot of these histories.
You find a lot of these buildings, they say what, like a handful of architects built and designed them all. It's kind of, and they built them all in like a 10-year period or something like that. It's like, come on, like no one had that much time, and they're not Supermen, you know. And the resources they would have had available at the time don't add up to the time frames we're told, and the skill involved as well. Because we can build these things today. There was a reconstruction of a Dresden cathedral.
Yes, correct.
And it happened over like a 10-year period using modern technology, and they did rebuild the whole thing exactly as it was.
Yes.
So we can do this today. But how did they do that with horse and buggy in 2 years?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's kind of, you have to ask that question. And a lot of people are like, got you. We can build these things. It's like, yeah, I never said we couldn't. How did they do it? That's the real question. And it's, again, when you actually, we're kind of daydreaming through life, aren't we? You know, most people aren't paying attention to the buildings in the high street, in the cities. They're not paying attention to those old buildings because history's boring. Why do I care about that, you know? And you've got your phone, you've got flashy things keeping your attention at all times. You're looking down all the time. You're very rarely looking up. Everyone's isolated. We keep to ourselves. We've got our own problems. I've got bills to pay. I've got to get food. My children's sick. My mum and dad are dying. Whatever it is, everyone's got a problem. You know what I mean? So everyone's busy in this little season, hyper-focused on themselves. They don't have time to look at these buildings around them. But there comes this moment where you stop for a second, you look around and you're like, whoa, where did these come from? Who built this? You have a moment, you realize what you're in. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? You know, you look at this ornate, beautiful cathedral right next to you in your tiny little humdrum town. And you're like, wait, who built that? Like, why is that there? You know, you see this Roman pillared museum next to you, and that looks like something straight out of the Pantheon. It's kind of like, why is that here in the northwest of England? And it's kind of like, you look around, you start to pay attention suddenly, and it's like it slaps you in the face, and you realize, like, I'm living in the remnants of a past ancient civilization of advanced people here who had the abilities to create not only things that are practical and functional, but beautiful. We don't do that today. We don't have the time or skill or money, apparently, to build ornate structures of beauty and function. We don't care about that. It's utilitarianism today. It has to just work. Build a cube, put a slanted roof on it so the rain runs off, put a door on the front and a couple of windows. We're good to go. We have an office. Bam. You know, it's kind of, today we don't take the time to literally gild our water ducts from the top of the building, you know, the rain spouts. Like if you look at some of the water spouts on these old buildings, they have the mouths of dragons at the bottom and they're all made in gold. And it's kind of like, who the hell has time to do that today? And it's kind of, who were the people who had the time to do that when they did it? You have to ask yourself that question. And the only time I can imagine where these type of things could have been built is when humanity is completely unencumbered by the devil. The devil isn't holding them back anymore. When money isn't an object, time is not an object. Worries are no longer an object. People have the time to care. They have the pride in their area and their buildings and their villages. The saints are walking around teaching people of godly things. People aren't sick anymore. They're being healed by the healing waters and healing frequencies of the cathedrals or something. You know, people are living their best life with the time to be creative. and to take the time to build something beautiful, just in time for when Jesus comes into their city and has a look around and says, "Look what I built, Lord. Look what we made. Look what we've done with your time you've given us in this glorious kingdom of yours.
Thank you.
You know, look what
So-
look what we've contributed to your kingdom." People cared. Why did they care that much? I can only imagine it in the context of, because Jesus is coming. He's going to check out your work. He's going to see what you've done with your time here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like his emissaries, the saints,
how
are walking
could they-
around. Go ahead.
How could they possibly have the resources and the skills and even the tools to build those unless they were in the millennial reign? So this is my observation. If I'm looking at countering the idea that there's no proof that the millennial reign already happened, my observation is these buildings are the proof. Because first of all, it's clear that they're lying to us about the history of these buildings. So therefore, they could be lying about the millennial reign. And secondly, the logistics of them are impossible to reconcile with what we're being told. So that tends to make you, again, say, well, the millennial reign would be a time when these things would be built. All right, let me go on. What I want to ask you about next is the Euphrates River drying up. This was, for me, the final thing that pushed me over. But I'm not sure if I have my eschatological timelines correct. In your narrative, is it correct to say that the Battle of Armageddon has already happened? That was part of the
Tribulation.
thing that already it took place already.
That took place in tribulation, the Battle of Armageddon. Yes.
Okay, so we still then on the time clock have not seen the Battle of Gog and Magog.
No.
Is that correct?
No.
All right, excellent. All right, here before you go off, here's my big question. Is there, because I can't really discern this myself, is there scriptural evidence to support that the Euphrates River drying up coincides with the Battle of Gog and Magog, or does it coincide with Armageddon? You follow me? Because if it does coincide with Gog and Magog, it's drying up right now, which to me would be a strong indication that we are in the period of time after the millennial reign.
Yeah, you could
Euphrates River.
You could say that that's an indication of the coming Gog-Magog war. I think
Why is that?
I think in that Revelation passage, it's a reference, because you have to. Which Euphrates are you talking about? Are you talking about the Euphrates that ran out from the Garden of Eden mentioned in Genesis? Or are you talking about this one that's at this geographical location we're told on the earth, today? And it's kind of, I think we may be lied to about geography here a little bit. So we have to be careful about looking for these type of signs, which they're telling us is X, Y, and Z. So I would be hazarding a guess whether or not to actually say that is a sign of the Gog-Magog thing. But everything else is telling me that the final Gog-Magog war is coming upon us. Who Gog and Magog is, I don't know. People think it might be Russia, or East versus the West type of thing. I hear a lot of those analogies. China involved as well. But I think it's a throwback to the old Gog-Magog war. And I think it's more a mention of the enemies of God will come together. I think by that point it's just saying all four corners of the earth, all the nations, Gog and Magog. By that point, the earth has been turned into the enemies of God. I think that's more so what Gog-Magog is referencing in that moment. Because there was, I think, falling short here, I'm sure there was a specific Gog-Magog war that already happened in the past, a long time ago, which were about specific people. I think today we're just talking about the enemies of God in that Revelation passage. Whether it lines up with the drying up of the current Euphrates River, I'm not sure. But I'm not even sure that is the real Euphrates. I'm not even sure that's actually the one that God created coming out from Eden. I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of evidence.
Wait, the Euphrates River that we have now is not the one that's referenced in the Bible?
Possible. I think it could be, because if you have to remember, I believe Jesus Christ is still on Earth. And this is something we have to get into as well. There's plenty, all the old maps indicate there's something in the North Pole. There's something there.
Ah, that's right. You're right. Okay.
There's a place in the North Pole, and I think the Mercator map is quite a famous one that shows 4 islands with 4 rivers coming out from a central black rock in the middle, right in the middle of the North Pole. Okay, and if you type in Mercator map, it'll show this old 18th century map, perhaps even younger, but one of those rivers, if that is the beloved city or New Jerusalem or Eden, it could be Eden as well. It could be that Euphrates is running out from that point, and what we call the Euphrates today is not where it is in the Middle East and in that region. This is cool. One of these is the real Euphrates. And there you've
I
got
didn't know that. That's really helpful. Thank you.
And here, if you notice to the left, you have the to the left there you have Canada, okay, and then you have Asia there to the top right, and that is the broadest plain. So from the tip of Asia all the way down to the tip of Finland and Norway, that is the broad plain of the earth, which the Gog-Magog will march towards the camp of the saints. That's the broadest plain we have, Siberia, and then Asia. So it would make sense that that's where Gog-Magog resides, somewhere around that region.
All right, so now we are getting into the wiggiest territory on this topic by far. Okay, so let me try to lay out my feeble understanding and see if I'm close to what your present theory is. I mean, I know your understanding of this is always evolving.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
People always are like, all right, well, if the millennial reign already happened, where did Jesus and the saints go? Well,
right there.
One possibility is right here.
Yeah.
And there is evidence that there is something in the middle there because of weather patterns going around it. And what are some of the other evidences that you feel support the idea that there is some sort of floating city or some pyramid where Jesus is with all the saints in the North Pole? It sounds ridiculous, but it's not.
There's so many reasons to believe this. First of all, the North Pole, you have geo-North Pole, which never moves. It's like an official point, which we call the middle, or the North Pole. But there's a magnetic North Pole, which is always moving. And it's been moving over the past 100 years from the coast of Canada straight across to Siberia. Whatever this moving thing is what your compass is actually pointing at. And it's possible that all compasses point to our Savior, which is Jesus in the north, and his floating giant city, which is the form of all the energy and power of the earth, and it's moving
Praise the Lord.
It's moving slowly towards land, which is going to be Siberia.
Wait a minute. I got to press the pause button. That's totally awesome. So whenever I am using a compass and it's pointing north, I'm walking towards Jesus. I love that.
Technically, yeah. And obviously you have these old maps and evidences, and Hyperborea is another example. It's where the Nazis were trying to get to. You know what I mean? It's kind of, there's this whole idea that there's this place in the north of abundance and beauty, and it's warm. It's got its own climate. It's got its own light source. It's not like the rest of the earth, and it's likely this is the camp of the saints. This is like the Eden. This is like where New Jerusalem descends from heaven and has descended and is, or currently perhaps visible or invisible, I don't know. It says during the millennial reign of the earth, and I think it's the book of Zechariah, people will have to make a pilgrimage every year to the beloved city to take part in the Feast of Tabernacles. And if you don't, your country will suffer from droughts. And we have swaths of deserts, all where the enemies of God are, funnily enough, and where the most pagan and backwards religions are. And it's possible during the millennial reign, they didn't go to this place in the north. They didn't pay the proper respects to the king, and they suffered droughts. These same places where Islam was created, let's say, which is a desert, things like this. And it seems like everyone knew this place existed until now. Now you go on Google Earth and there's nothing there. It's just an ice sheet that's forever moving and disappearing. But you look at the weather map, and there's something there that's blocking the weather in some ways, like a circle that changes everything. It changes everything around it. It's like a solid block. Could it be the peak of this mountain right in the center called Rupus Nigra, which means black rock? And obviously you have the banking corporation BlackRock today that owns quite a lot of things on the earth. You know what I mean? This is where it's all referencing to. And then let's look at the mythos we have surrounding the North Pole. Who lives in the North Pole?
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. And what does Santa Claus, what can he do?
He knows everything, whether you've been naughty or nice.
Yeah, that's right. So he's God. Okay, he's an omnipotent God who sees all. He's making a list and he's checking it twice. We have the Lamb's Book of Life in our own Christian theology, whether your name's written in it or not, depends on whether you'll get your eternal salvation in the new heaven and earth. He has his elves, which help him, do his thing, and Jesus is up there with his saints. It's a satanic inversion of the truth that we tell kids today. It's Jesus is in the north with his saints, not Santa Claus and his elves. Santa gives you stuff, material things, gifts. He rewards you for your behavior. It's a works-based salvation, and he'll give you nice things if you do everything right by his standards. Jesus Christ offers you things not of this earth. His salvation, his kingdom is not of this earth, and he offers you treasures in heaven instead. It's an inversion of Christ, and that's the mythos we tell kids today in the little season. There's nods and winks all the time, everywhere, telling you about what's going on in the North Pole. It's more than likely on this flat, stationary plane that in the center of it is our Savior. And whether New Jerusalem's visible or not is hard to say. I think there's been calls to say, and I had someone on the channel, Break the Hostility, I think it was, and he was explaining to me through his research into the text that there seems to be a period where New Jerusalem's visible, and then suddenly it's not. And I'm sorry I don't have the verses with me right now. Maybe I'll get them up another time. But it does basically seems like a veil gets put over New Jerusalem towards the end of the millennial kingdom, just in time for the little season. So it's hidden again. But it seems that during the millennial reign, New Jerusalem, the beloved city from heaven, was visible. And there's loads of coins that show a floating city in the sky, funnily enough. Conspiracy R Us has been doing a great presentation on this recently. And there's lots of these coins from the Middle Ages and the early Enlightenment period that show literally a floating, flying saucer-like glowing disc in the sky. And it's like,
how about the back of the $1 bill? You've got the floating pyramid on the back of the $1 bill.
Yeah, well, that's a takeover reference, isn't it? It's kind of like we're the capstone now. This is our time now.
That's
you know, it's all just cringy, backwards, satanic nonsense, inverting the truth. But yeah, it's possible a lot of these symbols were Christ symbols originally as well. But I don't know about that. But I've heard a lot of people say they've hijacked it in the little season and made it all satanic, when originally it was symbols for God and not the devil, and the devil's putting himself in the place of God now in this little season. So I've heard a lot of that speculation. But, you know, there's plenty of evidence to show there was a floating city in the sky at some point, and it disappeared. And we now live in a time where we're waiting for it to return. So, you know, you said, what are my top three? So I have, you know, the Christ's words, the words of Jesus himself. Then there's the obvious history manipulation. And then there's the architecture, number 3. I agree with you. That would be my third go-to. The evidence is all around us visually. Not only the architecture, but the signs of destruction on the earth. That's already come. The signs that tribulation has already happened. So I mentioned there's evidences for these cataclysms in the 1st century, which obviously wiped out 90% of the population of the earth. So that's the first evidences. But then you look at the signs of the damage. Everything's been buried under meters of mud. All the volcanoes popped off all at once. Volcanoes, documented history, didn't even exist until Vesuvius. The Bible doesn't even talk about volcanoes. They don't exist. But only in the 1600s did they get called something named after the god of fire, Vulcan, from the Roman gods, I think. And then volcanoes were named, formally so called. But it seems like volcanoes didn't even erupt until Vesuvius, which is early 1st century stuff, you know what I mean? And that's when sudden destruction started to come upon the earth. And that's basically trial by fire. And someone sent me a great quote, Moogle his name was, and I'm going to make a video about this, but he basically laid out all the evidences that even Revelation talks about volcanoes. And he doesn't know what to call them, though, so he's kind of describing these monsters with fire in their mouth that have tails that sting and all this type of... He's talking about lava flowing over everything, and it seems like he's describing a volcano, which he's witnessing in his vision, but doesn't know what to call it, because volcanoes don't exist yet. You know what I mean? So he's like, what is this thing? And it's kind of like, you know, all the underwater volcanoes suddenly erupted, which wiped out 1/3 of the ocean, you know, and turned the sea salty. It seems like a complete ice age came upon the earth after the volcanic ash blotted out the sun for years. You know, the tribulation has happened. And if you look everywhere, Cappadocia is a great example in Turkey, but you find evidences all over the place, especially in America as well, and in Spain. There's melted buildings everywhere. There are literal buildings. There's a whole science called meltology surrounding this now online. And showing there's just buildings everywhere, mountains that are basically castles that have melted. Bricks have turned to liquid, melted, and what's left are window arches and things like this with a little bit of brick remaining within the melt. You know what I mean? It's kind of the only thing that we have in scripture that describes that kind of event is tribulation, where 1/3 of the world is burnt up with heat, with fervent heat. You know, and we have evidences all around us, not just the architecture of the kingdom that came after, but the destruction of everything prior to that too, through the tribulation event. Again, my channel's been documenting this, and channels far better than I have channels dedicated to simply just showing the destruction. It's unprecedented. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm talking about Siberia. If you actually look at Siberia on the maps, it's decimated. It's absolutely destroyed. It's nothing but craters for thousands of miles. There's nothing up there. And it looks like bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb has just struck the entire thing. It's like it's been carpet bombed by unfathomable sized meteors that you can't even imagine. But you look at the old maps of Tartaria, it's rife with civilization. It's full of kingdoms and castles and all sorts of things on these old maps of the northern parts of Siberia. But you look at the maps today, you look at the satellite views today, it's a tundra. It's a lifeless tundra with no life cannot exist. What happened? What the hell happened to all those civilizations that are on the map? You know what I mean? Like, they're gone. They're just removed like that. And you have to understand that only something like a tribulation type event bringing judgment to these people could have caused such a thing. And Rome wasn't just this isolated kingdom. It covered everything. It was everywhere. These buildings are everywhere. The Roman Empire touched every corner of the earth and laid their foundations everywhere. And we still see remnants of their buildings here today. The Capitol buildings in America right now. You know, they're still there and they're being squatted in by people today. And people say, like, well, Christ wouldn't allow the Roman architecture in his kingdom. Well, actually, that's not true. Let's go to, can you bring up Daniel 7?
Yep.
Let's bring up the prophecy of Daniel 7. He's having his vision of the four beast kingdoms.
One moment, please. I do want to go back to the camp of the saints and talk about the war against the camp of the saints, because that's what's before us.
Sure. We'll finish this point first, then we'll get straight to that.
Sure.
So,
all right, here's Daniel 7. What verse?
I'll have to read through it quickly. It's probably good to read, actually, because he's explaining here about Rome just before it gets destroyed. So this is just before
take your time. We're not in a hurry. Go ahead.
So you can scroll past the initial three kingdoms, because we're solely concerned right now with the fourth beast kingdom. The fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. So this is Rome, by the way. He's discussing Rome right now. Right? This is it's not really contested by anybody else who is a theologian. The fourth beast is Rome. We know that. But everyone wants to apply it to today. But Rome's gone. It was destroyed in, the 5th century, so we're told, the collapse of Rome and all these type of things. I believe it was revived in the little season. We're living in Rome again. And it's everywhere. Because these buildings remained everywhere and they were re-inhabited again by the secret societies. They never disappeared, but it does explain what happened to them during the millennial kingdom. It explains why these buildings are still around in this vision here. So, it had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns, so kings. It was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one. So you have the Antichrist rising out of all of this. And it says here, they were plucked out of the roots, eyes of man, so speaking pompous words. Keep going. Let's keep going down here. Vision of the Ancient of Days. So this is talking about the destruction that comes.
Yeah.
This is talking, saying we can fast forward. I watched then the sound of the pompous words. So this talk about the Antichrist. And
okay, keep going.
No, go up a little bit. I think it's just before the interpretation begins.
So keep scrolling
So
down
it says
farther.
here, it says here now in number 14. So scroll up a little bit. Let me just get 13 and 14 together. Okay. So, actually, no. Keep going back up. You have to get 12 as well. It's been a while since I made a video on this ages ago, so I'm trying to re-remember here. So it says here, I watched because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain. So Rome gets cut down not long after the Antichrist presents himself. Okay? And its body was destroyed and given to the burning flame. So most of it was burnt up, destroyed by fire. Let's say volcanoes. Pompeii's a good example of one of these Roman cities being absolutely destroyed, okay? Just one example, but that's the popular one. The whole earth was being destroyed by fire by this point. Tribulation was a horrible time to be alive. Barely anybody survived. So it's saying here, destroyed by the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So it tells you right there, all this architecture, this pagan architecture, these grand buildings everywhere, which are in a Roman style, even what people call Tartarian architecture as well, still existing today. These are the dominions of all the beasts that came before the fourth beast, including the fourth beast. It was taken away from them, and they had to live through the millennial reign. Why? Because it says here, all the peoples in the nation should serve him, and his dominion is an everlasting dominion, it shall not pass away. It explains, if you keep going down here, once the Ancient of Day comes. So in the interpretation, it explains that these dominions were given to the saints. They were given to the meek. They were given to the survivors of tribulation and to those who were resurrected. So he was grieving his spirit. Make me know the interpretation of these things. The great beasts, kings which rise out of the earth, and kingdoms. The saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. So it says here, kings which will rise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom. So he's saying here, we're going to give these kingdoms to the meek. The meek will inherit the earth. This is what this means. All these buildings, aren't going to be destroyed. They're going to be given over to the saints. And the people who built them, the leaders of these old beast systems, they have to watch their kingdoms being ruled by the saints. It's kind of like a punishment for them, in a sense. It's like your punishment is, you're going to lose everything, and it's going to be given to those you subjugated. And they will get your buildings.
So based on this, then, is it your position that the buildings were actually created not by saints in the millennial reign, but by prior to the millennial reign?
It's twofold. So you have Roman architecture, which we call Roman architecture, which is all the stuff that was built during these beast kingdoms, including Rome.
Yeah.
It spread over the entire earth. It was everywhere. Okay? Once Christ came, he burnt up a lot of it, destroyed the infrastructure of most of it, took the kingdoms away from all the beasts, including all their buildings and land, all their architecture and their beauty and everything about it, made them live for a prolonged period of time. It says here, will extend their life, and they have to watch as the saints are given their kingdoms.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that's what the millennial reign was. A lot of these buildings were given over to the saints and those who were resurrected. And then Gothic architecture started to be created within the ruins of Rome. And that's when the millennial kingdom architecture began to be built next to the Roman stuff. And that's the millennial kingdom architecture. And you'll find Gothic architecture far surpasses Roman architecture. It's tenfold more impressive in every way, in every aspect, because you have what was and what the kingdom can create next to what was by comparison. But Jesus isn't going to waste these buildings. It's kind of, no, give them to the people who were subjugated by Rome. Let them have their buildings. Let them repurpose them. Let them live in those mansions. Let them have that during the reign of Christ. And let's turn them into something good rather than something terrible. And I think that's what happened. And if you keep scrolling down here, I'm pretty sure in the interpretation it basically explains clearly the saints will be given these buildings. It says here, and the judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. So it's kind of everything was given unto them, basically. You can have it. You can have it all. It says, this is the fourth beast kingdom. It'll devour the whole earth. Everywhere, every corner of the earth will have these buildings. And we find this, even in like Honduras, you've got Roman architecture. It's kind of like, and how did they build that? How did they? These are impoverished people, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you even have Roman-style architecture in China, in Japan. It's everywhere. These pillared architectural style is in places it should not be. And it only makes sense when you look at what it tells you right here. This is the fourth kingdom. It was everywhere, and it was destroyed. Most of it was destroyed. It says here, it shall persecute the Most High saints, and it'll tend to change times and laws. Scroll down one more. Then the saints shall be given into the hand for a time and a time and a time and a half. So all the courts shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion and consume it and destroy it forever. The kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. It says it right there. The kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. So all these old kingdom buildings were not all destroyed, and we have evidences for that. They're everywhere. I've told you the Roman architecture is everywhere. It was given to the meek. It was given to the survivors of tribulation and his saints. So that's why we have Roman architecture in with the millennial reign. It's not that like Christ wanted us to build things like that. It's more of a just give it to the people who were subjugated. Let them have it. Take it away from those who led them. And it has some weird, odd punishment. It's kind of like we'll make them live through the millennial reign, but they'll have to watch their kingdoms being ruled by Jesus' people. Do you know what I mean? That's the punishment. And it could be those are the people, those are the families with extended life who run the secret societies. who are in control and were eager to very quickly take back their kingdoms once the reign ended, once Satan was released. They were the people just waiting for Satan to be released and just biting at the bit to quickly take back control and re-establish Rome. And Daniel, this prophecy, you know, like 450 years before Christ, is kind of like it was mapping it all out for us. And, you know, it said of these prophecies, you know, seal up the scroll of these prophecies. They're for a future generation. Okay? Then you look at Revelation, and he's saying, do not seal up the scrolls of this revelation. Tell everybody now. It's happening now. You know, so the language has always been quite clear. What people things are meant for. We're only just rediscovering it now because we're actually applying audience relevancy for the first time. And we've been deceived into believing it's all about us. It's me, you know. But the truth is, these messages were for people of specific times, and the evidences can be seen with our eyes. You're not going to find a tell-all book. They were all destroyed. The Vatican alone has like 55 miles worth of books in their vaults.
Yeah.
There's information we're not privy to. Everything's hidden from us. We have been given a false timeline. Most of history is fabricated nonsense. Half of it's elaborated or expanded upon or duplicated and copy and pasted, and it's actually just a complete nonsense. Many civilizations we're told existed didn't really exist. We've been taken for a complete and total ride. We have no idea when we are, never mind who we are or where we are or anything like that. We have no idea when we are. And finally, it seems like in this time, this is becoming clear to us all. It's becoming more and more obvious, and we are being duped. And again, a lot of people's Christianity today, which I was a part of, is a weak Christianity based on lies. And that's exactly how Satan would want it in the little season. You have to be aware of that. Why do you think you're so special that you don't get to be those people living in Satan's little season? What makes you think you wouldn't be deceived in that time? What makes you think you couldn't be living in that time? You know, and again, the signs of the times we see today, utterly fabricated. And they make it obvious through the mainstream media that this is an Antichrist symbol or this is a mark of the beast symbol. It's like they want you to see it that way. You think they do a better job of hiding it if they were truly trying to bring tribulation upon us? You know what I mean? If they wouldn't make the mark of the beast so obvious, right? Or they wouldn't have so many candidates. They wouldn't name Barack Obama's car the beast to make conspiracy theorists go wild. You know, they're doing it on purpose. They're playing you. You know, they wouldn't make Donald Trump suffer a head wound where his ear gets clipped, you know, and rise again. It's kind of, they're always doing these things to rile up the futurists who are waiting for tribulation to happen. They're doing it on purpose. They're playing you. Come out of her, my people. Stop it. Turn off the TV and read your book instead. Read the Bible and read what it tells you is happening. Apply yourself into the little season framework and you will see it fits. It's scary how much it fits. It's obvious that's where we are. But most people are so heavily indoctrinated into the churchianity worldview and so scared of losing their status within that framework that they're not willing to openly discuss these things with their pastors. And their pastors have been gone through the exact same seminaries which go off the John Darbyist dispensationalist futurist doctrine, that they are hook, line, and sinker believing the narrative themselves that we're waiting for tribulation when, like I said, this is a new doctrine. 1830, really, did it start to become mainline anything? Was it even a concept? You know, most people thought the Bible is a history book up until that point. And we need to start applying the same level of scrutiny to it. We need to actually say, yeah, these things have happened and the historical record proves it. Like, what do you mean we're waiting for a third temple to be built so the Antichrist can go into it? That sounds ludicrous. Like, okay, so we're building a temple for the Antichrist? Can you hear how stupid that sounds when you really think about it? Like, so as soon as that guy rocks up in there, now we know who the Antichrist is. There he is. Like, let's welcome him in. Let's give him a red carpet, shall we? And say, right, go up there, please. We need you to go up there to fulfill our prophecy. That's ridiculous. That's not how it would have gone down. The temple was there. There was a temple in Jerusalem. And who was the Antichrist? Who knows? It was likely Nero. That's what seems to be the biggest indicator. There was, no heavier persecution was done under anyone else other than Nero. But we don't really know. All we know is that temple was destroyed. We don't need a third temple to be built for the Antichrist to stand in. There's plenty of evidences to say it's all already happened. Most people don't even know that temple was destroyed. Most people don't know this history. It's not taught to you. Like, it's not mentioned in like Sunday school or anything like that for most Christians. And this thing, I wasn't raised in the church. I wasn't raised through the seminary school or even a religious family. I came to my faith in 2014 at like the age of like, I don't know, 20, what am I now? 10 years ago, I guess I would have been like 23, something like that, you know? It shocks me that I can see this. It really does. Like, I don't know the rules of engagement for Christians, because I'm like, oh, well, no, this is what the Bible says, right? Look at this. Isn't this interesting? And most of the reaction I get from Christians is heretic, heresy. How dare you say that? It's kind of like, no, my grandma would be spinning in her grave if she could hear you saying stuff like this. It's kind of like, it falls on deaf ears with the indoctrinated Christian types. And that's when I realized it's like, oh, it's not enough just to be a Christian. You have to be a conspiracy theorist as well to get this. Because it contextualizes all the conspiracies. You know, and we can talk about the alien invasion agenda to finalize that concept, because that's kind of one of the other big evidences for it. But I went off a bit there. I'll let you go. Sorry, John.
No need to apologize. I'm letting you unload on us. This is Paul from Understanding Conspiracy, you guys. So if you want more of this, you go over to YouTube, Understanding Conspiracy, hit the playlist, and he's got 70 videos on this topic. And I just encourage you to dive in, because it definitely will change your entire view of your church, your Bible, the future. And it's like we say that the truth is stranger than fiction until we're confronted with a really tectonic shift doctrine like this. I mean, this is one of those atom bomb conspiracies that has it's head and shoulders above almost every other one in my portfolio of conspiracies.
It's not going away.
Millennial?
Either. It's not going away.
No.
This is one of those things that's just going to get stronger and stronger, because I think it's the truth. I think the truth is the truth, unfortunately. Like, you can't stop the truth once it's rolling, unfortunately. It's just the way it is, you know. And it's not like, and people want to try and make out like, well, you're making people lose their faith, because what's the blessed hope now, you heretic? And it's kind of like, well, your hope never should have been in the millennial kingdom.
Right.
Like, so first of all, that's a moot point. And the debunkers out there who have tried to immediately knee-jerk reaction debunkers on their big channels, they've got nothing. They've got nothing. No. Because faced with Scripture...
Well, you've got denominational inertia is what you have.
Yeah.
And like I've been in the church 40 years. In the church, on the platform. Not attending church. I've been in the ministry, and I have the first 10 years I was in 3 services a week for 10 years and never missed one. I don't know how many church services that is. Then about, I don't know, another 30 years in church. I am telling you, I never heard this mentioned, much less anybody talk about it like it's possible. 40 years. So what's the explanation for that?
How is that possible? Like, that's what I was shocked. That's what I mean. I was like, how am I the guy telling you this? How am I?
It's in the Bible.
It's like, how am I? I'm just a nobody with a conspiracy YouTube channel who became a Christian like 10 years ago. Why am I the person that has to tell these people these things? Like, come on. Are you serious? I was shocked. Listen, most of the arguments I get from the big channels, their arguments are based on, this can't be true because this is not how we've always done it. Like, that's basically, that's all it is. That's all they've got. It's kind of like, no, this is, we've always believed it's this, so that can't be true. That's literally the best thing. Or they attack preterism.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, well, preterism was created by Jesuits, so it's all controlled evil. It's kind of like, no. What I believe is based on the words of Jesus Christ, not some random Jesuit in the 1600s. That's what I've based my belief on. I didn't even know about that when I first started to discover all these things. It's where the evidence leads you. It's what your eyes will tell you when you just look around. And it's kind of like, well, it would have been historically documented. Oh, really? You think people can't rewrite history? You think people can't just lie to you? You think people can't just omit a book or a thing here or there? How many books do you think have been burnt throughout the millennia? How many libraries have been destroyed? How many cities have been leveled? How many civil wars have restructured society? It's kind of, everything's been messed up and destroyed. All these wars that happened from like the Enlightenment period onwards, all the mass civil wars, the world wars, which leveled and flattened some of the most beautiful cities to ever exist. Do you think that maybe they were trying to cover up something instead? I think that maybe that was a mass reset attempt.
Oh.
It's kind of, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so I see it that way. And it's kind of, you have these things like the early church fathers. Well, how do you explain them then? It's kind of like, well, maybe they weren't actually dated to the real times they've been dated to. Maybe they really were early church fathers in the first century. Maybe they were just there in the first 100 years, and then bam, everything came upon us. Maybe it's not spread out throughout the 1,000 years as we've been told, and this is, and maybe some of it's just made up. Maybe some of it is lies as well. Who knows? All I know is that time is completely out of whack. There's many historians who have evidences to prove this. I can't. What more can I say? What more can I truly say, John? You know what I mean? It's kind of. Yeah. I've said it for a year now on my channel. I've asked, like I said, all the experts, all the people who've been making videos about this longer than me, to present their version of the events, what they think of these interpretations, and I've taken a little bit from everybody. I am not 100% on all things, but I've tried to explain this is new. This is really new, in a sense. This isn't, and I'm sure preterism's existed for hundreds of years, but this isn't preterism. This is something else now. We have better evidences to base this on now because of what we can see with our eyes and the networking we have with the internet and the images we have available and the history we have available to us. And it's kind of the boots on the ground, people going out there doing the work, filming stuff we can actually see and make an image now, but it's brand new. And it gives us time. We're going to find more. Yes. This is not going away. This is going to snowball out of control and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's interesting because in the early stages, we had a lot of big channels come out and attack us. And if there wasn't a personal attack, then it was simply just debunking a straw man, which is preterism. Okay? Mm-hmm. Never hitting any of our points. Never actually... You could tell they haven't actually listened to us. You know what I mean? They're just falling back on the doctrine that they have, their own dogmas. And then I've noticed massive backlash goes against them. Everyone's saying, why have you done this? This is stupid. Have you even listened to these guys? And then now I've noticed no one said anything for like a year now. No one's debunking us anymore. Everyone's shut up.
Hold on. I want everybody to listen to that because what Paul is the path that he's on is the same path I'm on. And what you just said is what's happening now with the Bible changes, is the backlash from the followers of the church leaders that are stonewalling is becoming intenable to them. And they're going to be forced to deal with this. And they've done what you just said. They've gone silent from the beginning. We're getting stonewalled for 8 years because the church leaders have an agenda. They don't want this to be true. It's too difficult to deal with. But the next outreach we're going to launch is going to give away millions of copies of my book, and we're going to go around them to their donors. And when the donors agree that the evidence is overwhelming, the pastors are going to be forced. All right, so let me just, I've saved the best to last, in my opinion. For me, the question that Ricky Shaw is posting, pardon me, but where are the saints now in their glorified bodies? So if this is true, where did Jesus and the saints go? Okay, so we sort of touched on it before, but I want to show you something that's in your Bible. It's in your Bible, and it says they went up. Now, this is in context after Satan is loosed again for a little while. Mm-hmm. And it says they went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. Mm-hmm. Well, what the heck is this talking about, Paul? What is this, a war against Jesus?
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Well, so that map I showed you earlier, that's the only way it could be surrounded, is if it's in the center of everything. Okay? And if it is a circular disc in that sense, then yeah, that's how they would do it. And I think the broad plane of the Earth is the broadest plane, which would be Northern Asia, Siberia, Russia, that region there. It's likely where Gog and Magog is coming from, though it could come from east and west. So Gog and Magog could be northern Canada, all the Americas going up north, and then all of, obviously, the east are going up north as well, up the broad plane of the Earth to get to this camp of saints in the center, which is likely where they all receded to when the millennial kingdom ended.
So the narrative, the best you can understand it, is there was a millennial reign where Jesus was on the earth physically with glorified people and maybe mortals as well, but I'm not sure of that. But then when it ended, Jesus packed up and said, all right, we're going to go up north. and I don't know how they got there, but they got this city, and they're living there now in the North Pole. Is that what you're trying to tell us,
New
Paul?
Jerusalem descended down after tribulation. His kingdom came from heaven, and people witnessed it happen. And like I said in Zechariah, it explains people during the millennial reign, people, not the glorified bodied people, normal people who probably the descendants of those who survived tribulation in the repopulation attempt, who were ruled with an iron rod, as it's described Christ will do when he returns. Were ruled then. Funny, isn't it? The Dark Ages are the Iron Age. They ruled with an iron rod.
Yes.
And yeah, it'll be a theocracy. It's full on dictatorship. It's a kingdom. There's one man in control. Jesus. It's not a democracy. You don't get a choice. You know what I mean? And he has his kings in place, his rulers, his glorified appointed saints, and you find all these cathedrals that were built during this time are named after saints, and it's possible these are headquarters for these guys, the local emissaries that the people could go to intercede to Christ on their behalf. They had to make a pilgrimage to the camp of saints, so people had to go north. They had to go to this place to pay homage to the king, and if you didn't, you suffered drought. It's in Zechariah. It's there. See if I can find the quote. I've got my own document here. See if I can find it. Let me just Command F. Zechariah.
All right, while you're looking for that, I just want to restate this. You're saying, where's Jesus right now? Jesus is on the earth at the North Pole. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, well, it's likely his saints are in the North Pole, but Jesus is in his city in heaven, his beloved city, New Jerusalem.
All right, so the saints are at the North Pole.
I think for a short time, for the most of the millennial kingdom, the city was visible. I think people could see it. I think that it was documented on coins. It's been documented all throughout odd cultures who didn't know what they were looking at, as well as this floating city in the sky. It seems to have gone invisible at some point, Wakanda style. It vanished, basically. Which is, again, Wakanda is a nod and a wink to this concept, It's possible the saints are still on the earth in the camping around the beloved city, in the camp of saints, but they're waiting for Jesus to come back down again. It's possible, and I've speculated how this is going to play out, so maybe I can tell you my chain of events, how I think this is going to play out in our time, the Gog-Magog War. But all the programming for the past 100 years, and I mean that, since Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, since the Theosophical Society has come up with the idea of a world teacher appearing in 2025, this idea that there's going to be a revealing of an advanced civilization of some kind, or aliens, shall we say. War of the Worlds, Orson Welles did a radio broadcast reading War of the Worlds, and people genuinely thought tripods had invaded and were shooting their own grain towers in that time. People were easily convinced by the brainwashing then. And since then, you had a concerted effort through the mainstream media to prepare people for the coming alien invasion. All the movies have been telling the same story over and over and over and over and over again. It's
This is where I wanted to get to. This is what I wanted to get to. This is intense. Listen to this, guys. This is so crazy.
Okay, and look, I'm saying this as a conspiracy theorist, so this millennial kingdom topic makes sense of the alien agenda. It makes sense why there even is an alien agenda to begin with, and this is why I say it. You have to put it in context. So consider the millennial kingdom like a lens I'm putting over the alien agenda to try and understand it. So from that context, we have an explanation now for why aliens, why the point. So not only do you have to first indoctrinate people into heliocentric model, vast infinite universes in space, opposite to the enclosed system of the biblical cosmology which we truly live in, then you also have to indoctrinate people into evolution, and then obviously invent false histories to do with dinosaurs. So then we believe that we are an ever-advancing race of primitive beings who have to take control of their own evolution or suffer extinction, and that we are probably going to either been seeded by aliens, or aliens will eventually turn up anyway because there's infinite universes, therefore the probabilities are high. And we've been brainwashed to believe that today. That's what all the mainstream institutions and movies are telling us will happen. Okay? So every film is geared around this. Humanity's at war with each other. And then suddenly aliens turn up. That in the sight of a giant mothership, or something like just monsters appear and start killing everybody. Humans tend to push back the first wave of destruction. Then all of humanity drops their differences and comes together as one. And then they go and make war with the giant mothership. And then, it's peace on Earth. Everyone comes together as one, or something like that. It's a unity after that. All our differences are suddenly dropped to one side. We are all one. Humanity and we're all fighting for our own extinction here. We're fighting for survival. Let's all come together as one and go make war with this thing that's appeared in the sky before it gets us. And I imagine that's exactly why the programming is like that, because that's what's going to happen in the end. I believe New Jerusalem, which is a giant floating city, that's exactly what it's described as. I think it's something like 1,500 by 1,500 by 1,500 miles wide. This thing's the size of continents. This is not a joke. Okay, this thing is enormous, and it will be seen by everybody from all four corners of the earth at once when it becomes visible. And as soon as that appears, say New Jerusalem does just pop into the sky all of a sudden, or if it is already there, the cameras suddenly get pointed to it at the appointed time when they're ready. Everybody's going to see it, and the only thing the programming has taught them to interpret it as is alien mothership from outer space. Mm-hmm. That's the only interpretation the normies, as you call them, have. They don't have any context to understand it in any way, shape, or form as anything biblical, because they don't know the Bible, and they certainly haven't read that part. So when New Jerusalem does appear, we're going to believe we're under attack by aliens. And that's likely when the powers that shouldn't be will release their own alien stuff. So the underground military bases will release the monsters that they've been genetically engineering. The sea bases will release the UFOs they've been building. The anti-gravity UFO technology they've been building. And then they'll attack the people. And they'll make it seem like the mothership has sent its wave, an army after the people and attacked us. But really, it's just New Jerusalem has finally become visible again, just as the prophecy said it would. Let's get the people. Let's attack them so they think Jesus is attacking them. Do you get what I mean? It's like a double blind. So it is a false alien invasion, as we believe is going to happen. Blue Beam will probably be involved. They'll project something else in the sky. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be an absolute mess. But then I likely believe maybe the alien greys will attack us or something. Now, the alien greys, from what I understand, are an invention of the people to create like meat body flesh suits for the spirits to get into, the Nephilim spirits to get into. They're very limited in their capacity. So the devil created the alien greys, but then guess who's going to rock up and defeat the alien greys? Good aliens from out of space, probably from the Galactic Federation of Light or something. I don't know, some stupid cheesy name they'll give it. Yeah. It'll be like a Hollywood movie. And they'll push back the evil aliens for us. The alien greys will get destroyed. They created the problem. They'll offer us the solution themselves. You know what I mean? And then maybe the mothership hasn't appeared by this point or something. I don't know. Maybe that comes after the first wave gets pushed back of these evil invading UFOs. Good aliens turn up, defeat them, and then they say to us, "Listen, humanity, you're falling behind. You need to take all these advancements. You need to take control of your own evolution. You need to become like us because they're coming back. Those aliens are coming back for you. That was just the first wave. We're here to get you prepared for when the mothership turns up. You know what I mean? We're here to get you ready for the coming final wave that's going to come next. You've just survived the first wave. Let's get you to a peak level of evolution where you can make it through the next wave. And then humanity will go for a period of peace, a time of prosperity. We'll learn all these wonderful things and get all these wonderful technologies from Lucifer, the devil himself, posing as a being of light, as an angel or an alien from the Zeta Reticuli. I don't know. The Pleiades or something. He'll come up with some bollocks, And then everyone's hook, line, and sinker bought it, And then maybe New Jerusalem appears. You can time it however you want. But by the time New Jerusalem appears, everyone's then like, the second wave is here. The aliens have come to attack us. We've prepared for this. Quick, everyone get together as one army, the number of the sands of the sea, billions of people, all together as one, march up the breadth of the earth towards the middle, surround the camp of saints or the evil invading UFO, and let's get them before they get us. And then fire comes down from heaven, destroys everybody. And that's where the final Great White Throne Judgment begins. The only way I can see people being convinced, all nations to be convinced to come together as one and make war with the camp of saints in an army the numbers of billions, is what I've just explained to you there. And that's what we're primed for. We're prepped for that. That's what the programming has been for like 100 years, to get us to think this way, perceive reality falsely through the evolutionary heliocentric model design, and also the whole alien indoctrination is to get us prepared for aliens to turn up, for humanity to come together as one, as a new world order, and then to push back the evil invading aliens. It's all a lie. It's just Jesus, New Jerusalem descending from heaven, to kickstart this final Gog Magog war. And that's it. That's the narrative I so far theorize is how it's all going to play out. This millennial kingdom lens makes sense of the alien agenda when you think about it this way. It contextualizes it perfectly. And it's why we even have the alien agenda to begin with. Because there aren't aliens. There aren't extraterrestrials. There are just terrestrials. They're here from Earth, just like us. You know what I mean? They're evil spirits. They're disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, along with fallen angels who created them. You know what I mean? And they're in rebellion against God. Always have been. And they're playing us. They're playing us big time. And I believe that's not actually too far around the corner anymore either.
No. I just saw a video of how they weren't able to get space weapons under Reagan, but they will get them under Trump. And this would then be a fulfillment of Psalms 2. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. So when you think of space-age weapons, Werner von Braun told his secretary the first deception would be with meteors, that they would need space weapons for meteors, but then he said the final one will be that they'll need space weapons for aliens. But what Paul is saying is the evidence is with this narrative, it fills in a lot of the questions. They're going to point humanity to think that the camp of the saints is Nibiru entering the solar system, and here they come to get us, and we all have to fight. So they're going to do what is written right here in Psalms 2.
Yeah, there are many narratives. Yeah, Nibiru has returned into our solar system. And look, a huge mothership's just appeared. The Anunnaki have come back to kill us or something. They'll have some stupid narrative that people have bought into to pass off Jesus as the enemy. And, you'll find that is pretty much the narrative of every major Hollywood alien film I've ever told you've ever seen in your entire life. Yep. And it's they always invert the truth, And I think by that point, the people may have been turned into Nephilim type creatures with superpowers and stuff like that. They would have taken some real hardcore genetic engineering stuff. I think it'll be like Endgame. All the superheroes have come together as one to fight against Thanos, the evil god alien who's come to bring judgment to all of creation by snapping them out of existence. That's a Christ inversion. It's kind of Christ does come to destroy the earth. This is the thing. He comes to renew the earth. He comes to get rid of the old and turn it into something new. And the people who are in control don't like that. It's kind of, they've come to destroy our way of life. Let's get him before he resets everything. You know what I mean? So from the controller's perspective, yes, Jesus Christ is an evil invading alien who's come to destroy the earth. But from our perspective, it's like, please reset this damn thing. It's hell. It's awful. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, they have played on that in a way, and people's sensibilities to be against God are being funneled into this, channel it into killing the aliens instead type of thing. And you have to imagine as well, people like me and you, who are maybe thinking this way, how are we going to be viewed as Christians who refuse to join humanity's army? It's like, what do you mean you're not going to join the army to fight back against the aliens? What are you, a traitor to humanity? Do you want to see humanity go extinct because of your backwards desert religion for a god that never turned up after his promise of 2,000 years? You're still clinging on to all that nonsense when aliens from space are right here, right now? Or are you some kind of backwards lunatic? And what do you do to traitors during wartime? You kill them. That's what's going to happen to us. All I'm saying is, if a mothership rocks up into space, don't join the army.
Yes, please.
Don't do it, okay? It's test of faith time. First of all, you're not supposed to do that anyway as a Christian, whoever you're fighting. You probably shouldn't be doing that. But second of all, in this scenario, you could be making war with Jesus himself. It's not worth the risk, is it? God will forgive you for not joining the army, okay? Yes. But he won't forgive you for making war with his son. So make the choice, What's the worst it can do? Kill you?
What you said was so true, in that when I was listening to you on that last rant on this whole narrative that how this may play out with the alien agenda, I could feel myself not cringing, but going, oh, this sounds so crazy. And it's only because of the journey that I've been on that I could just say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how crazy is it that there's orb wars over your head now, and death fog and all these things. So they put the alien agenda and all the sci-fi things that are real in front of us as science fiction movies as a way to short circuit our ability to engage these things for real. Because when you, like, I would try to bring them up to my kids and their response was, "Oh, Dad, it's just science fiction." So that's an ingenious way of, predictive programming or brainwashing us not to be able to have the capacity to even consider these things. And that's most of the church. Most of the church. And the third book I'm writing is going to be basically what we've talked about off and on through this whole talk, which is the church leadership has gotten a failing grade when it comes to conspiracies. And I believe that in this hour, you cannot possibly properly minister to your flock unless you're a full-blown, card-carrying, 33rd degree conspiracy theorist kook nutjob.
That's right.
You have to own that narrative. You got to own the fact that you are going to be persecuted as a kook if you want to walk in the truth. It's just another form of persecution. But now it's like being proven. Look at all the churches that lined up their people during the health emergency thing. And, that was certainly proved us that this is relevant. And what Paul is just talking about with this ridiculous idea that Jesus or the saints are floating on a pyramid in the North Pole. I mean, imagine coming into that narrative at the very end of this and listening to that. You would have turned it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You need
talk.
the context of the conspiracy to understand why I'm saying these things. If you've been a conspiracy theorist for like more than a decade, everything I've just said is like, oh, that makes sense now. It's kind of, you know what I mean? It's kind of, that's why all that's happening. That's why all these conspiracies exist. That's why we even have a conspiracy. It's because of Christ. Right. It's because he told the truth. It's because his kingdom really did come on earth for 1,000 years. And we really are in the little season. It all adds up now. It's why we even have secret societies. It's why there's such a concerted effort to deceive us. Because people always ask like, oh, why would they do this? Who would do that? Who has the time to do all this? You know what I mean? It's like, what's the point? Why would who are they? You know what I mean? Like, who are they to do? You hear all these typical things. It's kind of like, well, actually, if you understand all of this, it's obvious why they're lying to us. They need to cover up the kingdom. They need to cover up Jesus, big time. Yeah. That's all they've ever been trying to do, and they need to control the narrative and all of that. So we don't know what time we're in. So when aliens turn up, we have no context to understand biblically what's going on. Massive falling away. Think how many people would reject Christianity if aliens turn up as well. You know what I mean? It's kind of, but all the while, they're rejecting Christianity while witnessing the glory of God's kingdom. Imagine that. You know what I mean? That's such a
right. And what if there's a fake tribulation and no rapture? You're going to lose a lot of Christians as well, aren't you?
That too. And also, you have to understand that we did see in that time period of 2020, when things go down, people fall back on their programming. Okay, they fall back on the programming, and all these movies have been programming people on how to behave when the thing happens. Okay, and there's been many outbreak movies up until that point, and people are told, trust the government, do what you're told, and you'll be fine. Okay, and when it comes to the alien narrative, everyone's been pre-programmed to believe the governments will all come together for the best interest of humanity, and we'll beat this thing. Okay, so fundamentally, people will fall back on their programming because of fear. And I also believe, if aliens did turn up, 10% of the population would die instantly from fear. The hearts would stop from fear. I believe so. I think some people are so lost and unaware of anything like this at all that when a giant mothership turns up, it'll be so alien to them, no pun intended. Yeah. The heart will stop. They can't it's too much. They'll die with shock.
It's like Neo in the Matrix when he finally takes the red pill and he goes through the process of coming out. It's pretty volcanic process, and that's probably what it's like for what you're talking about. A lot of people are just going to die. They can't take it.
Well, it says men's hearts will fail them for fear in a tribulation context. So many Christians will take that as well and say, see, it's tribulation. It's happening now. You know what I mean? They'll use anything they can to justify that they're in Revelation 16 and not Revelation 20. And this is what you'll find. A lot of Christians will also go along with the false narrative. So not only will a lot of Christians fall away, those who still hung on will fall for Lucifer's lies and believe he is Jesus returned. The good aliens that turn up to save us, they'll think that's Jesus. They'll think that's, the good guys, and he'll say, okay, all the world religions, you kind of got it right, but you're all kind of wrong as well. You know what I mean? And he'll say, you're all really talking about me. I'm the Buddha. I'm Jesus. I'm Vishnu. I'm all of these gods of your religions. You know what I mean? You were all talking about me, and you're kind of right a little bit, but you're also all kind of wrong, and I'm here to lay it out straight for you. And they'll spin some stupid universalist religion, the New Age religion for the New World Order.
Well, that's the Project Bluebeam narrative from the Rand Corporation and the UN, is they're going to have all the gods merge into one. Well, let me just summarize this then, like the takeaway. Since we're, like Proverbs says, the wise man sees danger afar off and prepares. So here we are. God's, thank you, Jesus. He's given us the heads up. As these things unfold, what is our strategy to maintain our sanity and to not be drawn into this? Like, first of all, you said, don't join the army and go fight the camp of the saints thinking it's the aliens, right?
Yeah, well, that's the basics.
Secondly, you're going to have to make a decision up front what you believe, because the voices that are going to be tearing at your simple faith are going to be many, and they're going to be compelling. There's going to be earthquakes that uncover archaeological evidence that prove the gospel isn't true, or holographic videos by the ETs showing that Jesus is one of them. All of these voices are going to have one goal, which is to tear down your faith and depart from the simple gospel truth, right? Especially the Bible changes. Oh my gosh, there's one other question I got to ask you before I let you go.
Sure.
All right, so I did a poll on one of my live streams where I asked people, is it true that star forts are something that you never knew about until just recently? And it was like 70% had never heard of star forts. Now, I know that that's true with a lot of things in the awakening. Like, I never knew that the boats don't go over the curve. Well, that was always there. But what I'm suggesting is that since the majority of people never heard of star forts, there is a possibility, because we're having timeline shifts, that star forts, Paul, are actually a part of another timeline. And I wanted to just broach this as we close this out. On your journey that you're on, you're researching and trying to make sense out of the false history. Are you open to the idea that some of the history could be a different timeline? And how, I mean, there's really no way to reconcile or sort that out. You just have to sort of be aware of it.
I'm open to the possibilities with anything when it comes to conspiracy. So yeah, maybe I'm going to base my assumption that that's not the case, and assume that star forts were created as some kind of water harnessing energy device during the millennial reign for now. I don't think they were bastions of fortresses for armies. I think they were created as cymatic frequency structures to move water in specific ways, because you'll find that's what surrounds them normally. And they were more used as a practical thing to harness the etheric energies than anything else. I think that's what they were for. And we kind of live squatting in the remaining remnants of them. I'm like you. I didn't really know they existed until I started doing this research maybe like 5 years ago. Same. So I'm open to anything, but it's like you said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Maybe it was always there, but your consciousness wasn't aware of it type of situation. So I'm open to it being a part of we've shifted timelines and suddenly they exist. But then I'm also weary because people could then say, well, the little season didn't exist in the Bible till we switched timelines as well. You could probably say that, but
I had that quote. I had the quote in the live, and that's the problem with it, is it's so destabilizing that a lot of people just don't want to deal with it. And however, I myself, and I've heard this from quite a few other people in my community is that if a content creator is not addressing these Bible changes, like a Christian content creator, then it becomes harder and harder for them to stay with them. So the Bible changes becomes a really, really important issue that all content creators, all pastors, all people that name the name of the Lord have to put, because you're relying on the scriptures for virtually everything that you stand for. And if it's true that it's changing, and I'll just mention that you did have me on your channel, and that interview, by the way, is, if you sort by popular, that interview has gone to number 8 out of 500 of your videos. So your community really received that conversation and that topic. I looked at every single post. There was over 500 or 600. There was maybe a few negative ones. So that's that interview for me was extremely edifying, because what I realized is that I can go into a Christian community like that, and that large, and have such little pushback on this topic.
Mm-hmm. No, really it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I've always been interested in the Mandela effect, because I still don't fully know what to make of it, to be honest. I think it's obviously happening, but it's so wild and so confusing and complicated and paradigm shifting that I'm open to listen to anybody tell me what's going on there, and I'll take it on board as a possibility, because it's like you said, you need to be prepared for any eventuality, what's going on and coming in from the distance. You need to be ready for that, you know, which is why I do what I do. I don't want to be caught off guard when whatever happens. You know, I want to know every possible scenario before it goes down, so I can go, right, they're using plan Y, let's go with that. You know what I mean? It's kind of, because that's the point. They have like a filing system of A to Z end of the world plans, and they're going to play whatever they can play at the time that'll work based on where the people are at, you know. And I want to try and figure out any possibility, and the Mandela effect has played a huge part in that. And yeah, I think it has something like 23,000 views now. It's doing quite well. People responded quite well to it, and I think in this time people are open to hear these interpretations, because it's wild. It's like we're clearly living in a time of deception. People are waking up, for lack of a better phrase, you know, and it's kind of, I'm not saying everyone's coming to Christ necessarily, but I do think there's a lot of that's happening too. More so, a lot of people are now sick of the nonsense. They're kind of realizing we can't trust these leaders. Like, everything they're telling us is a complete bunk. But at the same time, we have to remember there's an agenda called the externalization of the hierarchy at play, where they're going to reveal themselves to be in control, and most people are going to accept it tacitly. They're going to say, well, what can I do about it anyway? I got my own problems, you know. So what if they're in control? You know, and that's how they do it, soft disclosure, to the point where we're passive enough to accept it as a reality and just move on and do nothing about it, you know, and even join them. Great, I'll join them. How do I get into the Illuminati? Sign me up, you know. That's what most people, a lot of people will start saying that, you know. But the Mandela effect is a good one. And we had a great talk about that. I recommend anybody go and listen to it. It's not a topic I talk about regularly, but I'm glad there's people like you out there who are still keeping this going from a biblical perspective. I'm happy about it.
Yep. And your work has been very influential in my life and the community, and we appreciate you coming on so much. Paul, this has been exactly what I was hoping for, that we could just put a stake in the ground on this topic. I can now refer to this with anybody that I'm having a conversation, because we pretty much hit all of the highlights that I was looking to do, and I appreciate your expertise and just taking time to talk with us tonight. And we will definitely stay in touch.
Oh yeah,
and keep bringing this topic up as we go. As I said, it's a front burner issue for Christianity in this hour, because if you're thinking the tribulation is coming and it isn't, your paradigm is way off. You're going to make bad choices. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Any last words as we sign off here that you'd like to just say before we go?
Yeah,
let people know where they can find you too.
Sure thing. I mean, first of all, it says here behind me, I got this as a gift from Elizabeth Joyce, an artist who is a subscriber of mine. She's working on the coloured version of this picture. You can't see it, but it's a bunch of birds in a cathedral window. And it says Matthew 22:37, and I think it's poignant. It's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and that's what it really comes down to here. I do these things because I love God. I love Jesus. I want to know the Father, and through his Son, I have that ability, and that's all that really counts. And I want to be a part of the kingdom. And I want to work towards his kingdom, and understanding his kingdom is the end to all this means. That's what we've been promised. That's what we get, The new heaven and earth, his kingdom is eternal. When the new heaven and earth turns up, the millennial reign was just a taster of things to come. It was an earthly example of what the heavenly kingdom could be, and it's not the be all end all of everything. It never was supposed to be, and it seems like it had a purpose to fulfill, as all things have a time and a place, to build out the world in preparation for the rest of the dead to turn up in the little season, so they have a chance to accept Christ. Okay, and it seems like that's the purpose. Why would God allow Satan to be released? For free will. It all comes down to choice. We have to choose him. No, it's not like everybody gets saved. And no, people would like to believe that. But there are bad people in this world who will not accept him, who do deserve judgment. And that's not for me to decide. I'm not the guy who separates the wheats from the tares, So when it comes to this topic, just please open mind, people. Okay, and I know, don't have your mind so open that your brain falls out. I know, I've heard it all before, but this is not one of those situations. This is the words of our Savior. Either he told the truth or he didn't. So you need to take it seriously, okay? And I am just here trying to get people to think about it. And there are people better than me. There are. Okay, I'm just a guy who talks a lot, and people like listening to me for some reason. But all of my research is based on the shoulders of giants who came before me, who have honestly laid out far better cases than I have. You've got the Alpha Talks, you've got Conspiracy RUs, you've got JC Follows JC, you've got Jason Jack, you've got Madeline from Leaving Babylon. There's some of the key players in it right now, and they all come out with fantastic work. Really fantastic work. And even that's based on top of the Christians, who are based on top of the secularists and the Tartarian research, like John Levi, for example. You know what I mean? And then there's Static in the Attic, I think it is, and there's a lot. They've been doing it for years. You know what I mean? Yes. But the thing is, it's like layer upon layer of information, new revelations every week, and I'm just a part of that. And come join us. We're just people. We're not like anything. We're just trying to figure it out because it's new, it's fresh. We don't have all the answers. We're not claiming to have all the answers, but we know where we've been lied to, so we're looking for the answers. And honestly, I've had some amazing comments from people who have shown me so many things. And these are just a part of the community who are thinking along with the rest of us. And some of the comments I get, it's like, that's incredible. They found that, you know what I mean? And they're looking with the rest of us. I've had people messaging me saying, I've talked to my pastor about this topic now. I finally confronted them about it. Pray that they open their mind and accept it. And I've had people saying they've been rejected and kicked out of their churches. I've had other people saying, my pastor told me he knows this is true. It's just that his congregation won't like it if I told them. So it's a mixed bag out there. It's a strange world, but this truth is getting out. It's being discussed in the churches now. We're on the forefront of this wave, and I think it's the right information for the right time. I think this is all in God's control at the end of the day. Honestly, I'm thankful that I'm being used in some small way to do that. And obviously, thanks for having me on again today, John, to discuss this. It's and I'll have to get you back on my channel again to talk about the conspiracy stuff. Because like I said, I've been listening to your audio book. I've just had a baby again, a second child. And then while I'm feeding them late at night, I'm just sat there with your audiobook in the background listening for like an hour at a time. And it's good. So yeah, you'll have to come back on my channel as well.
That'd be great. I would love to do a talk on that topic, because this is the time now where us conspiracy theorists are going to, in different ways, we're going to be approached by these folks who have been basically turning their backs on us. It's raining red pills, and so we need to prepare how we're going to respond as they are humbled by reality. So that's a great invite. I'll take it anytime. Paul, as well, we'll reach out to you. I know you're busy, but down the road we'll have you back. And guys, be sure to go over and subscribe. Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube. Paul, thanks so much for coming. It was a home run. This is going to get a lot of views, and appreciate all you do, brother. God bless, man.
God bless. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Are you tired of the same old conversations?
Do you often find yourself struggling to know what to say? Are you over discussing the news, sports ball, or the weather? It's time to put boring discussions behind you by leaving a copy of The Nephilim Look Like Clowns on your coffee table, your toilet, your local library, mother's car, boss's office desk, or that person you really like's bed instead.
What the hell is this?
Oh, that? Why, it's just a book about how the modern costume of a clown is a caricature of ancient giants and modern demons.
Stay away from my children.
This is a conversation you can't wait to have.
My family used to think I was crazy, but thanks to The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, they know I'm crazy.
The Nephilim looks like clowns. It's no laughing matter.